inland you are, the better chance you have of seeing some sunny spells into the new week. Remaining fairly unsettled though throughout next week, maybe a bit of respite from the showers on Tuesday and becoming colder in the north.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza. In a few moments' time, we'll be crossing over live to Tel Aviv to speak to GB News Home and Security editor Mark White to get the latest developments on Israel and the Hamas conflict. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Tatiana.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest. Sirens were heard in northern Israel a short time ago as anti-tank missiles were fired at IDF personnel near the border with Lebanon. Tanks and artillery are responding with fire, striking Hezbollah military infrastructure in Lebanon. Earlier, Israel said its troops are in the field, suggesting a ground offensive in Gaza may be in its early stages. The military is advising residents to relocate immediately.
For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to temporarily relocate south. Let me repeat. We urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to relocate south immediately. This is a temporary measure. Moving back to northern Gaza will be possible once the intense hostilities end.
Well, large crowds have been marching in London and other cities this afternoon. People have been gathering to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. We'll bring you live pictures from central London as we get them. But as we know, protesters have been heard chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That despite controversy around that slogan's meaning. Police were seen violently clashing with pro-Palestinian protesters close to Downing Street. The Met Police had warned that officers would intervene if people were deemed to be supporting terrorism. Meanwhile, the United Nations has overwhelmingly adopted a resolution calling for a humanitarian truce in Gaza. The resolution, drafted by Arab states, condemns all violence, terror and indiscriminate attacks against Palestinian and Israeli civilians. It's not binding, but could put diplomatic pressure on Israel to de-escalate the conflict. The UK's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says there's no reason to believe Hamas would observe any ceasefire, as he reiterated the UK's support for Israel.
We have been focused throughout on ensuring the safety, where possible, of the British hostages and the British nationals in Gaza. We've also been speaking to try and secure their release, but also to have the humanitarian aid get into Gaza. We will continue to pursue those aims, and the conversations that I've had with the Israeli government, we have reiterated our support for their right to defend themselves, but also that they do so in accordance with international law.
In other news, there's no relief in sight to a record backlog of Crown Court trials. That's according to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Max Hill KC, who's stepping down this month, says a shortage of barristers and judges is clogging up the system. He says cases are at an all-time high, and while the judiciary has been expanded slightly, it's not been enough to alleviate the pressure. Latest figures show more than 65,000 cases are still awaiting trial. A proposal to close rail ticket offices has resulted in the biggest ever response to a public consultation. The RMT union says around 750,000 passengers have had their say ahead of an expected announcement on the future of ticket offices at train stations. The union's head Mick Lynch is warning the government against the closures, saying that 98% of respondents are opposed to the controversial plan. Around £7 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on renovations at the Speaker's house. Lindsay Hoyle took office in 2019, and since then, more than £1 million a year has been spent on the property, including on staterooms and offices. The figures, which were revealed in a Freedom of Information request, don't say how much was spent on furnishings compared to structural improvements. However, the Telegraph understands that some of the money has been spent on silverware. It's looking to be a dark and gloomy Halloween weekend, with weather warnings in place for parts of England and Scotland. A yellow warning covers Brighton, Portsmouth, Canterbury and London, with the possibility of heavy rain. The Met Office says there's a small chance of power cuts, as well as flooding and delays on public transport. Warnings also remain in Scotland, with some rail services suspended following the damage caused by Storm Babbitt. And if you've ever waited too long to use a gift voucher, spare a thought for the new owner of this coin. It's one of only 50 tokens created in 1766 that allowed its owner free access to every show at the Old Vic Theatre in Bristol. It's due to be auctioned by Henry Aldridge and Son this weekend, and despite being nearly 260 years old, the Old Vic says it will stand and honour its word to the new owner. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, I'll be speaking to GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White to get the latest developments in the Israel-Hamas war. And then at 3:20, it's Climate Control. We'll be debating were meteorologists correct. Were they correct in their climate predictions following Hurricane Otis in Mexico and Storm Babette in the UK? And should diners have to pay a climate footprint charge at restaurants? Then a former Brexit Party MEP, campaigner and political commentator and mother of 4, Belinda de Lucy, will be my political spotlight this week. Belinda will be talking about her time in politics and all the work that she's done while bringing up her 4 girls, whilst also raising awareness of baby loss. Now, on the way, though, my difficult conversation. Now, this is one that is not to be missed. I'm going to be speaking to an entrepreneur, an educator, Buck Angel. Now, Buck is a transsexual man who transitioned 30 years ago and is concerned about the transitioning of children and implications that it will have on them. And he spoke to Brianna, who was forced to transition at just 13 years old. Have a listen.
After the bottom surgery failed, they cut off all contact, and I found out a few weeks ago they wiped all of my medical records. They wiped my clinical summaries. There's no information about what happened to me.
So that's coming up. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So, of course, the big story, Israel. It's announced it's hit over 150 targets in last night's raid on Gaza as the operation marks the heaviest bombing of the war so far. Palestinian residents of Gaza reported clashes with Israel armoured vehicles and inventory overnight in numerous locations in the Gaza Strip. There are still 229 hostages held inside Gaza as the situation has been described by many as descending into chaos. Well, GB News security editor Mark White is live in Tel Aviv. Mark, can you give us an update? What's the latest?
Well, still fighting and shelling that's going on in Gaza as we speak. In fact, throughout the day, there have been airstrikes and artillery fire directed towards northern Gaza. We're told that there are Israeli forces still on the ground in northern Gaza. Hamas has said that it has shelled Israeli armoured vehicles in northwestern Gaza. We've been unable to independently verify that. Certainly on the briefing, the last briefing that was given by the Israeli Defence Forces senior commanders, he said that no Israeli forces had been injured or killed as a result of the operations overnight. The Israeli Defence Force Minister, or Israeli Defence Minister, says that this is a new phase in the war that they have entered, and they will continue on with this intensification of the airstrikes and the ground level incursions until they have a new order. And it's not just the operations in Gaza. We're seeing increased activity on Israel's northern border with Lebanon, with Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon, firing anti-tank missiles and also mortar rounds towards Israeli military positions near the border with Lebanon. The Israeli military have been responding with artillery fire on those positions, and also renewed activity in Syria with targets there. The Israeli military says that have been firing missiles towards Israel, and also US bases in Syria that have come under renewed attack, despite an operation by the US just yesterday to attack a couple of military positions linked to the Iranian military there and their proxies, which is also in Syria and southeastern Syria.
Mark, can I ask you, though, inside Israel, because you're there in Tel Aviv, what has the response been like? Because a lot of the West are calling or talking about a ceasefire. And I'm wondering what the energy is like in Tel Aviv and what people are thinking when they're hearing members of the West saying that perhaps we should have a ceasefire. I know it was voted for.
Well, there are many here in Israel, understandably, who just want the ground war to start and for the military to get in there and to destroy Hamas. However, there was a poll that was just conducted and the results shared yesterday, which showed those surveyed, about half the people surveyed want a pause in that ground war. They don't want that to begin just yet because of the fact that there are at least 229 hostages still being held by Hamas, and they want time to be given to negotiations to allow those hostages to be freed if that's at all possible. We have heard from Israeli defense sources that the escalation in the activity in Gaza overnight in terms of the ground incursions and the airstrikes was taken because of feedback from diplomats on those negotiations to free hostages, which seemed to suggest that actually that was stalling, that Hamas was just playing for time, and a decision was taken to intensify the campaign against Hamas.
Well, listen, Mark, thank you very much for that. We will catch up with you throughout the show. You're seeing pictures from, I think, from Egypt towards Gaza, so you can see what's happening there. This is GB News. That's Mark White. He's our security editor. We will catch up with him throughout the show. But I'm also now joined by Uri Geller, who is a performer and a mystifier, and he's there in Tel Aviv now. Uri, so talk to me about how you're faring up and the people around you, because, of course, this is happening. It's a war. And, of course, you're in it. You're in the midst of it.
OK, Nana, first of all, again, thanks for having me on your show. Believe it or not, I had an entire family visit my museum today. So there are people who are going out and about shopping. But please allow me to go back a few weeks. And, Nana, you know, the Hamas attack on Israel on the 7th of October is the same as if 10,500 people in the UK were massacred in a single attack. What do you think the British government would do? I mean, Israel goes out of its way to avoid civilian casualties on the Palestinian side. But it is inevitable that many will be killed because Hamas hides behind civilians. It uses Palestinians as human shields. Now, Hamas knows that Israel is too humane to touch it. Can you imagine, just imagine this, Nana, can you imagine Britain allowing terrorists to fire rockets from the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital or the St. Ormond Street Hospital? This is what Israel is dealing with. And do not forget that more than half of the 220 hostages, maybe even more, are citizens of other countries. But where is the UN? Where are the UN? Where are the governments? Where are the people? There should be demonstrations worldwide for the hostages, but the silence is deafening.
Do you think that a lot of people in the West who are calling for a ceasefire are actually quite naive? Because, you know, a pause in the fighting and a ceasefire are totally different things. So do you think that people saying, oh, ceasefire, ceasefire, is a very naive way to go and that would never happen?
Well, I would call it more than naive because the atrocities, the murder, the butchering, the slaughter of what happened here. You know what, Nana? If you have guts, after this conversation, I'm going to send you a film that is still not circulating. I dare you to sit down and watch it. So this is what we are going through. And people around the world, they don't see these pictures yet, the photographs, the films, but it has to come out. We have to show the world what happened here. Hamas is ISIS, worse than ISIS.
Well, I mean, tomorrow, I'll be having Elon Levy on. He's the man who hosted the press conference to show some of the images because there seemed to be almost a denial, or so he said, or he felt that, about the atrocities that were causing, and people seemed over-concerned about what's happening in Gaza rather than remembering what happened on the 7th of October as well. But I want to quickly talk to you about we noticed that, thankfully, the Israelis still have a sense of humour because you had a spoof about the BBC.
Yes, and it's an amazing spoof. I know the people who did it. I know the actors. And sadly, Nana, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. We'll
you have to show it. Nana, you have to show that spoof.
Oh, yeah, we're going to play a little bit of that throughout the show, Uri, just for a laugh. Uri Geller, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. You take care.
Thank you.
That is Uri Geller. He's live in Tel Aviv. He's a performer and a mystifier. I'm now joined by military historian and defence analyst Chris Newton. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. With your observation and obviously the historical knowledge that you have, is this almost... a lot of people are making comparisons with what the Nazis did to the Jewish people years ago. Is that a fair comparison to make?
Well, good afternoon, Nana. Well, I mean, certainly the goal of Hamas is to destroy the state of Israel, and it is an anti-Semitic organisation. So from there, you have the comparisons, and they play into anti-Semitic tropes and so forth. I suppose the key difference is that Germany was a state with a full military, and Hamas and the affiliated terrorist militant groups are non-state actors, are terrorists, and therefore this is a very different kind of war. It's a counterinsurgency, it's a counter-terrorist operation, as opposed to a state-on-state conflict.
And your thoughts on the strategy of the Israelis? I mean, are they wise to get onto the ground in Gaza quickly? Or, as we know, the sort of Hamas Metro, or the Gaza Metro as they call it, that would be a big concern, of course, because a lot of those tunnels are deep down, the rockets probably won't impact on them, and they are placed in places where, civilians will be there, so in hospitals and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, they've been given a couple of weeks to gather intelligence and so forth. So the ground invasion is beginning, much longer period of time than we first envisaged. But in terms of the strategy, what 7th of October ultimately represented was a failure of the previous Israeli strategy, which the IDF called mowing the grass. So in previous wars, they just went in, caused a bit of damage, reduced Hamas's capabilities, and then left. And they did that on the ground in, say, for example, 2008 and 2014. Obviously, that strategy has not worked, and therefore, the Israeli military were thinking about this even before this. In 2020, they were changing their operating concept and doctrine. So now the goal is the elimination of Hamas, to go in on the ground with as much force as possible given the restrictions, but it comes with risks as well, as you say. There's in a war in which there's going to be civilian casualties, and there's risks of escalations as well, with other actors potentially coming in a bigger way as well.
And very briefly, the aim of the Israelis is to sort of wipe out Hamas, to eliminate Hamas, the terrorist organisation. Does history tell us that is actually a possible and achievable goal?
I think what they can do is to severely weaken Hamas, and the parallel I always give is the campaign against Islamic State. For example, those in 2016, 2017, that also involved a big siege in Mosul. And what happened to Islamic State is that it was severely reduced. Its ability to carry out kind of extremely deadly attacks was degraded. But Islamic State is still there; it still exists, and you're still going to get Palestinians who believe in fighting Israel, and of course you've got the West Bank as well, and Hezbollah in Lebanon too. So yes, you can. I think you can weaken Hamas quite severely and cripple them, but there will still be problems in the region.
Right, Chris, thank you very much for your historical knowledge. That's Chris Newton. He's a military historian and a defence analyst. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Up next, it's climate control. We're debating, were meteorologists correct in their climate predictions? We're speaking to the director of Car 26, Lois Perry, and senior meteorologist at British Weather Services, Jim Dale. But still to come, this is an interview you won't want to miss. Buck Angel, he's a sexual entrepreneur and educator who's concerned with the transitioning of children in his latest podcast. Now, here he is speaking to Brianna, a trans woman who began her medical transition at the age of 13. Yes, 13. Have a listen.
And so now I'm 22, and I'm like, I have my entire adult life, but I have no sexual function. So what does that mean in a relationship? Now I want a family. I can't do that. I want to be in a long-term relationship, but I have no sexual desire, no sexual feelings. I don't even know what that feels like. So I don't really know how to do any of that.
Well, you won't want to miss that at 5 o'clock. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's fast approaching 25 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's now time for climate control. And I'm asking, were meteorologists correct in their climate predictions? Hurricane Otis struck Mexico's Pacific coast on Wednesday, as reports say that 80% of hotels and streets have been damaged and flooded, with dozens killed. This is the latest storm that has caused loss of life after Storm Babette killed 3 people last week. So were meteorologists correct in their climate predictions? Well, I'm joined now by senior meteorologist at the British Weather Service's Jim Dale and director of Car 26, Lois Perry. Well, I'm going to start with you, Jim Dale, seeing as you are a meteorologist. Go on then. Were they correct?
This particular storm, Hurricane Otis, intensified dramatically, unlike virtually every other hurricane there's ever been, due to very hot waters off that coast in Mexico. And to be frank with you, meteorologists were not on top of it. Why? Because it is one of the factors of climate change that these intense storms happen kind of out of the blue in a way, and that is one of the results of climate change. So this is we're walking in new territory. It's as simple as that. So were they correct? No, it was missed, to be honest with you. It was absolutely missed. Not sure what they could have done about it anyway, but it was missed because of climate change.
So you're saying it was missed because of climate change? Yeah. But what else have they missed then? They probably may have missed a lot. Lois.
Well, I'll tell you. Go on.
Lois.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's been lots of activity globally, volcanic eruptions, and there's also been stuff happening under the oceans which have warmed the seas up as well. But the point is, I mean, you know, the introduction said, you know, were they right with their meteorological predictions on the climate? There is a difference between them predicting weather, though, and climate, and they get conflated, and Jim, bless him, does that all the time, because weather happens... It's completely unpredictable and mad
Which
and
is
wild.
out of the blue.
And you look at it over a 30-year period, you really do not say there's a storm here, there's some rain here, this is evidence of climate change. I said this before a couple of weeks ago, that even the IPCC working report says that there's been no escalation in weather events or extreme weather events over a prolonged period. So everything, apparently, according to Jim, is to do with climate change.
Can you respond to that? Because the IPCC report did say that there's no real change, as it were. And I know that last week you kind of poo-pooed it and said that, you know... And we talked about NASA. Lois also mentioned NASA. And you said... Hang on. You said, well, we were talking about Storm Babette, and you said we should ask the people in the storm whether they feel the climate change. But I'd refer to you and say, well, surely NASA and the IPCC probably have a bit more about... I'm
not offside with NASA and IPCC. I'm not quite sure where this information is coming from. But let's make something straight. Let's make something straight.
No, let me just be straight. Where the information came from was from the IPCC with regard to weather and NASA. That's what Lois said last week, so that's where it's come from. You're saying you don't know where...
That's what Lois said. If she's extrapolated something that is not true, then that's what it is. The IPCC report is huge. I've read most of it, to be honest with you. There's no misdirection here from the IPCC. Make it absolutely clear. And there's another thing to say. We're talking about meteorology and climatology. I know the difference. I've been working in meteorology for 40-odd years. I know exactly what the difference is and what climate is. I'm not sure a political pundit like yourself, Lois, necessarily...
I'm not allowed to have an opinion.
You're allowed to have an opinion, but you're on my subject. I'm not quite sure where you're coming from.
Though, is it?
It's not my subject.
Isn't your predominant subject like predicting for sporting and betting companies whether it's going to rain on a match day?
No,
Isn't that the main thing you told me that your company does?
Well, you told me
that's
that today.
one of the... That's what we do.
Just as we're walking into Marx's, you told me that's what you did.
We did a bit of shopping, OK.
That's what you said.
Part of weather forecasting is to provide to clients who value meteorologists, like myself and like others, who supply valuable information to many different concerns. And that is the case. Climatologists are slightly different, but you have to cross over. Climatology is something that is weather over a longer period of time.
Can I just be honest? Stop talking about it, because all you're going to do is you're going to spend time explaining what the differences are without actually talking about the subject itself. So I want to bring you on to the climate footprint charge for diners. They are now putting a climate footprint charge for us if we go to a restaurant. Lois, what's your view on this?
Well, I think the most important thing is actually the food miles. We should be eating locally. I mean, this is just another way of them taking the mickey out of diners, really, and making as much money as possible. It's a woke charge. They might as well call it that. But the food miles are important, not because of any CO2 emissions, but because we should be eating locally. You know, we should be having... Because the food is fresher, there's less preservatives. If you're in London, you should be having London smoked salmon, like Foreman smoked salmon. If, you know, you should be having English wines, English cheeses. That's good. That's what they should be doing.
There are also other brands of smoked salmon available.
No, they're not.
Yes, there are. Let's not do that, please, Les, or else I won't bring you back. Jim Dale.
So I'll give you one word, and that's choice. I don't disagree with actually what you said in terms of if you can shop local, eat local, do it. It's fine, no problem whatsoever. But this particular thing that you're referencing, there is a choice. You don't need to pay the levy if you don't want to, and those that wish to and add a pound or two onto their bills, whatever it is, then they you know, you can do that.
But are you in favour of it?
Pure choice, as it is when you fly an aircraft, by the way.
Are you in favour? Well,
I'm in favour of it. I think it's a great idea.
Which you do regularly when you went to Thailand the other day. Do you think it's a great idea?
The other day, I haven't been for a year.
What, to Thailand?
Look, make something clear. There is nothing wrong with flying. It's overflying that's the problem.
So
it's eating beef overly.
Where do we
that's
draw
the
the line? What's overflying to you? At what point? How many flights? How far?
Well, if you're flying every second day and every second week, then that's probably a bit too many. But I think one flight a year, as I do, generally speaking...
Is that to choose a new wife?
What? Where are you going with that?
No, he's been married to his wife, who's from Thailand, for at least 10 years.
Yeah, wrong speech. Wrong speech.
Right. So listen, Jim. So, like, to confirm, how much is overflying? Then you think flying more than once, but as long as you go once a year to somewhere like Thailand,
I'm not saying once. It's within reason. All I would say is this: in terms of things like flying, things like eating beef, what the climate side is looking for is just a reduction of that, little bit by little bit.
Why?
So that, well, let's take beef. There's two reasons for that. One, beef is one of the reasons. Beef cattle is one of the reasons it puts out much more CO2 than any other food that we eat by far.
That is so disputed.
It's not disputed one little bit. Now,
well, it is.
There's another side to it as well.
It really is.
Well,
can I just come in?
Sorry, Jim, stop.
OK. It is extremely disputed, and actually it's to do with methane, isn't it, or something to do with that. And I've met so many much more qualified, I'd hate to say this, but there are people in the world that are more qualified than you, physicists and scientists, that think that what you're saying is so wrong.
We're talking greenhouse gases. We're talking greenhouse gases.
Yeah,
there's another side to it as well.
Disputed.
There's another side to it as well, and that's the health side. You know,
what do you mean the health?
Hang on, wait, no, stop.
Doctors.
Can I just say, sorry, health is my specialism.
Yeah.
So, Jim, close your mouth when it comes to that, because there's certain elements and vitamins that you can only get in things like red meat that most people need. So don't start with me on that. Right, so that's, of course, that's climate control. What do you think? Jim Dale and also Lois Perry, thank you so much for coming in and joining me. But what are your views? gbviews@gbnews.com. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, difficult conversations. I'll be speaking to entrepreneur and educator Buck Angel, a transsexual man who transitioned 30 years ago, who's concerned about the transitioning of children and the implications of life-changing surgeries at such a young age. You will not want to miss that. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
It's 3:33, Aaron Armstrong here in the GB Newsroom. Sirens were heard in northern Israel a short time ago as anti-tank missiles were fired towards the Israeli army near the border with Lebanon. Tanks and artillery are responding with fire, striking Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. In the south, Israel says its troops entered Gaza last night and remain in the field, suggesting a ground offensive is in its early stages. It follows a night of intensified bombing and airstrikes in the north of the enclave. The military is advising residents to relocate immediately.
For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to temporarily relocate south. Let me repeat. We urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to relocate south immediately. This is a temporary measure. Moving back to northern Gaza will be possible once the intense hostilities end.
In London, large crowds have been marching this afternoon to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Some of those taking part were heard chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," despite controversy around the slogan's meaning. Police were seen violently clashing with some pro-Palestinian protesters close to Downing Street. The Met has warned that officers will intervene if people are deemed to be supporting terrorism. And it is looking to be a dark and gloomy Halloween weekend with weather warnings in place for many parts of England and Scotland. These pictures posted to social media show flooding in a popular shopping area of Hastings. Rain warnings are in place covering areas including Brighton, Canterbury and London. Warnings also in parts of Scotland with some rail services suspended following damage caused by Storm Babette. More on all of our stories on our website, gbnews.com. Now, it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. Coming up, it's Political Spotlight. Former Brexit Party MEP, campaigner, political commentator and mother of four, Belinda de Lucy will be joining me in the studio. But next, psychotherapist Lucy Beresford will be live to discuss whether you should be allowed to sue social media companies if you suffer from mental health issues as a result. That's on the way.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. It's 39 minutes after 3 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? It's all good, though. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online, on digital radio. Now, this is a story that caught my eye. The company Meta, which owns social media sites Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp and Messenger, is being sued by dozens of US states over claims that young people's mental health has been endangered by Instagram over its addictive nature. A lawsuit filed in a federal court in California has said that Meta has harnessed powerful and unprecedented technologies to entice, engage and ultimately ensnare youths and teens, prompting the question, should people be allowed to sue social media companies for the deterioration of their mental health, or should they just get off the site altogether? Well, joining me now to discuss is Lucy Beresford. She's a broadcaster and psychotherapist. Lucy, this seems a nonsense, right? It's like trying to sue somebody because you've got fat from eating too much food. It's their own fault. Nobody's forcing them to consume it, surely.
No, that's the wrong analogy. The analogy you want is tobacco companies. This is the next scandal waiting to happen. The tobacco companies knew what physical impact tobacco and smoking had on their consumers. And social media companies also know how addictive their platforms are. And our brains are designed specifically to get very excited by things that reward us. So if we actually get used to the sound that our phone makes because we get a message or someone DMs us or somebody likes or retweets our tweets or X's or whatever they're called now, that actually that is a very pure psychological pattern. And the big platforms, Meta in particular, know exactly what they're doing because they are commercial companies. And therefore what you need to do is to hit them where it hurts. Now, I completely agree with you that we have some personal responsibility for that. If you are finding that your mood decreases or that your mood deepens, darkens, because you're using quite a lot of these platforms, then yes, you have that choice. But something has already happened when you're addicted to these platforms. And don't forget, there is now a whole generation of people, Gen Z, who have only known life online. They're not like you and me, Nana, who had to learn how to use social media. These are people who have only known social media. And in a way, that's what we need to be protecting. That's why these states have started suing Meta.
But Lucy, where does it end? I mean, where does it end? If you can blame someone, oh, it's your fault with my mental health because I went on social media. I made the analogy of food, but there's loads of things you could do that say, you know, that you could say somebody's made me do it, and because of the way it is, it's your fault. I mean, you might even go on a dating site and, you know, meet someone horrible and blame the site. I mean, how far can you go with this? Surely people have to take on their own personal responsibility, and parents need to be the ones who are monitoring the children.
That's a really interesting example, because absolutely you don't have the corroborative evidence as to what that person really is until you go on a date with them, which is why before you go on a date, you take extra precautions. You make sure that your first date is in a public place, or that somebody phones you, or that they know where you're going. Similarly with social media, there are certainly things that we can be doing in terms of limiting our consumption and our exposure to those platforms. But the problem is that the algorithms that the technology companies know full well is built into their products is very, very addictive in a dangerous level.
Well, listen,
Lucy,
Lucy, your audio is a bit dodgy, so we're going to leave it there, but it's really good to hear from you. Thank you very much for your view on that. It's Lucy Beresford. She's a broadcaster and psychotherapist. Well, if you just joined me, this is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's just fast approaching 44 minutes after 3 o'clock, which means it's time for this week's Political Spotlight. And joining me to shine a light on politics in this country is Reform UK spokeswoman for Education and Family, Belinda de Lucy. Belinda is also the former Brexit Party MEP, a campaigner, a political commentator, a broadcaster, and perhaps most importantly, the mother of 4 girls. Belinda, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Gorgeous dress, by the way. Wow.
Thank you, thank you. So, Belinda, I just want to start with you as a person, because I remember seeing you thinking, God, what a sprightly, brilliant woman.
Oh,
yeah, I did.
Very kind of you.
She knows her stuff. So, talk to me about you. I mean, like, a bit about your life. Where were you born?
I was born in Sheffield, and my mum's from Carlisle. My dad's from down south, and we moved down to Kent, where I went to just a local comprehensive school and grew up in a very sort of old-fashioned family, I suppose. We didn't didn't have a huge amount of money. You know, holidays were spent sort of camping in tents at various parts of the UK and sometimes northern France. A big family. I'm one of 4. And of course, I went on to have 4 under 5, same as my mum. So, so I'm used to chaos, and it suits me very much. You just have to surrender to it when you've got large families. Yeah, and I sort of got onto the political ladder, if you like, when I was 19, and I met Nigel Farage outside Twickenham Rugby Stadium. I was selling programmes, because back then it was the only way I could get a ticket to go and see the rugby. It was harder for girls back then. And he was selling those little pound pin holder signs, and he was asking me about what I was studying, and I was telling him, he was like, you need to study European law and understand what's happening to the country. And he planted the seed. And yeah, and it was about 10 years later when the Lisbon Treaty was signed, I was like, gosh, that chap I met outside that rugby stadium was right about the EU. And then I went on to study more and more and ended up with a master's in EU law, part of the Brexit party, got elected, couldn't believe that, and fought UK's corner in a very hostile parliament out there.
How amazing. And so, of course, now you must talk to Nigel Farage quite a bit, you get to see him and everything else like that, and he knows that he had this effect on you. Yeah, he changed my life. And from what I've known of him, he's such a sincere, authentic man. There's no spin, he says what he feels, and his duty and service to the country, when you think of what he's sacrificed to get the UK back to self-governing, has been enormous. I'm incredibly proud to have worked with him, and I'm a huge supporter of his. And if only we could have him as PM, Nana. He doesn't want to do it, but frankly, I don't blame him, because you don't actually get anything done that way. It's true. He's probably better off and more effective on the outskirts of it, making comment and being able to sort of inject his views and make changes like the incredible work that he's done with regard to the banking, which is just in Dame Alison Road. Do you think that she should get this massive payout?
And it does seem it just sits wrong, because it wasn't just a sort of mistake or error. I feel like there was some sort of purpose behind it. And people on the right of politics, like myself, like Nigel, like many others, face such double standards. We don't get the same amount of freedom or privilege as those on the left do, who have the correct BBC-approved think. You know, we have to be very careful what we put on Twitter. We have to be very careful what we say about ourselves in job interviews. You know, if I put "I'm from the Brexit Party" on a CV to go to a job, that would probably count against me in a way that it wouldn't if I said I was a Lib Dem. And so I do think it's great that he's exposed that kind of bias and almost chilling of free speech. So it's like, if everyone was able to say freely what they thought without any punishment, I think we'd see a lot more people speak out like Nigel. But instead, there's this sort of horrible impact on free speech, that this sort of punishment culture towards people like myself on the right. And it's good that he's exposed it.
You have to be brave. You have to be like an armadillo with a shell on it.
My mum and dad taught me a thick skin, so I'm trying to pass that on to my kids.
Yeah, me too. But you talked about your children. Now, I know you said you have 4 children.
Yes.
But I know that you went through baby loss. You know.
Yes, I did. When I was 26, I found out I was pregnant, and I was engaged at the time, and knew that 7 months down the line I'd be going up the aisle with a huge tummy, a bit like a shotgun wedding. But it was very, very exciting. First grandchild. All the scans were absolutely fine. And then 4 weeks after we were married, I was about 1 or 2 weeks away from 9 months. I stopped feeling the baby kick. And I was on my own. My husband was away for work. So I just nipped down to the hospital thinking it was going to be fine, because people don't really talk about stillbirths very much, certainly not to someone, you know, my age. And so it'd never even been a thought. And the nurse just came in, took a scan and said, we need to get the doctor in here. And he told me that my baby had died. And it was just surreal, an out-of-body experience. And I had to gather my thoughts and try and understand what that would mean. The process for women to have to give birth after they've known their baby's died is quite a traumatic one.
I can imagine.
But being so young, none of my friends, had any experience of it. It was quite a taboo subject. Baby loss is quite a lonely experience for women because it very much happens within us. No matter how supportive partners can be, it is quite a lonely grief, and to navigate your way through that was definitely a challenge for me. And I mean, her name was Sophia. She would have been 20 a couple of weeks ago. It's like the boulder of grief I was carrying around with me has reduced itself to a lovely little pebble that I carry around in my pocket, and I just put my hand in and squeeze it. But the process of producing the next human race for women has been tough since time began. The losses that women experience and the grief and the loneliness with that grief and the trauma of creating life and it dying is so unique to women. I wanted to talk about it because of the lonely process, to reach out to other women who've gone through it, saying you're not alone, you're not going crazy in your grief, it's completely normal to feel like the world has been a bit... It's not that the world's rejected you, it's just a deeply lonely experience sometimes. I went on actually to help other women through baby loss who had no family in the UK, because I relied so much on my mum, who was amazing, and my old school friend Catherine. The two of them helped me through it enormously. My husband was fantastic, of course, but I love men and they're wonderful creatures, but it's hard to tell them what it's like or have them understand the process of losing a baby. So my heart goes out to all the women, because I know it's been Baby Loss Awareness Week recently, but time can heal, and you're all mothers to angels in the stars.
Oh, that's beautiful. And you've got 4 other children as
Yes,
well.
they're all teenagers now, 4 girls. They're a handful. There's a lot of drama in my house, Nana.
Okay, I can imagine. 5 of you now. Your husband must be thinking, oh, God.
Yes, we have 3 dogs, so it's all, there's no taking off shoes in our house. It's all sort of chaos, everything's everywhere. But as long as you get, if you're going to have a big family, as long as you get them by the time they're 5, run a tight ship.
Yeah.
That's my mum's advice. Get the discipline in then, with tough love, overwhelming love, but, a strict...
Probably kept going thinking, well, we'll have a boy soon.
So people used to say that to me, but my husband was obsessed with having daughters. He was like, no, I just love being surrounded by girls, and of course, they take care of him. They adore him.
Of course they would.
Daddy, would you like a beer when he comes home from work? Whereas, I get all the aggro. But I love it. I'm very, very lucky and blessed.
That's lovely. That's so lovely to hear. But that must be quite tough, because you've got all your politics side, then managing your family. They're older now, so it's probably a lot easier, I should imagine.
It is, although they're becoming, because they're of the age group where they're at school, where I have to do so much unravelling. I think many parents can connect with me on this. What they go through at school and universities isn't the same sort of education we had. There is indoctrination going on. There's kind of social camp engineering going on in our education system at the moment.
It's terrible.
And so I find that a parent's job now is so much harder, because you have to challenge all these views that are getting planted in their heads, which are so intolerant. And so that's definitely an edge of parenting. I say to my mum, you never had this with us. I've got to, keep reminding the girls, single-sex spaces are worth fighting for. Remember the suffragettes, all this hashtag be kind to men who want into your spaces. You're going against everything that women have fought for. So there's been a little bit of that unravelling needed. But on the whole, I think that they're smashing, and they've got thick skin as well. So I'm not sure they'll follow me into politics, though. That's the only thing.
And finally, GB News, we have Boris Johnson joining. What do you think of that?
Well, I think Boris is a fantastic entertainer. He's also a kind of a comedian, and is so bright and so clever, and I love listening to him talk. I'm highly critical of him sometimes as a politician. We disagree on a lot of things, like the green zealotry, and I know he's quite liberal on immigration, but I love that GB News is not an echo chamber, and it has more liberal presenters as well on those issues. I think he's a great force for fun, and he's interesting. He's written so many books, and he's a brilliant guy, and people are kind of a bit fed up of grey suit technocrats always presenting politics in Parliament now. And now you've got a fun and flair and a bit of a glitter zone in with Boris, and I think he'll provide a good entertainment, good value.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I hope I get to meet him. If you could pass a pearl of wisdom to people, what would it be? The thing that has probably helped you through your life that maybe you keep coming back to in your head?
Stiff upper lip. I think I'm a firm believer of this. I think it's amazing what humans, our ancestors, our grandparents have gone through in their lifetimes and survived and got through it. And I've got a lot of war diaries at home from my grandparents, and I read them a lot, and they inspire me that actually humans can get through so much mental and physical trauma and survive. And also, all will be well and all shall be well and all manner of things shall be well. That is my mantra anytime, I go to sleep with worries on my mind. And that's a good one to stick to.
Belinda de Lucy, thank you very much. That is, of course, the fabulous Belinda de Lucy. She's a former Brexit Party MEP, political commentator and a campaigner. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. I've got an interview you won't want to miss.
Good afternoon. My name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So for many, there's been plenty of rain and showers around to start the weekend, and this is all due to this large area of low pressure that's going to bring weather fronts up from the southwest across the UK as we go through this weekend. So already into this afternoon, we've seen further heavy rain and maybe the odd thunderstorm too, making its way northwards. And that's going to continue as we go through tonight, to be followed by further heavy showers, especially for southern and western coasts. Particularly blustery as well around both southern and northern coasts, with the potential for coastal gales. So as we start Sunday, a pretty gloomy and wet start for northern England and most of Scotland, with outbreaks of rain that have made their way northwards overnight. Elsewhere, a continuation of those heavy showers, though fewer are making their way inland and staying more confined to southern and western coasts for the second half of the weekend. So a bit more in the way of sunshine and feeling pleasant in that sunshine, with highs of 14 to 15 in the south. Now, as we move on to the new week, it's a bit of a cloudy start again, with further showers around, but mostly going to be around the coasts. So the further inland you are, the better chance you have of seeing some sunny spells into the new week. Remaining fairly unsettled, though, throughout next week, maybe a bit of respite from the showers on Tuesday, and becoming colder in the north.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello, good afternoon. It's just coming up to 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB Newsroom. Israel has exchanged fire with militants on its northern border with Lebanon as fears grow that the conflict in the Middle East will escalate. Sirens were heard in the area as anti-tank missiles were fired at the Israeli army near the border. Tanks and artillery have responded, striking Hezbollah military infrastructure in Lebanon. Earlier, Israel said its troops remain in the field in Gaza, suggesting a ground offensive is in its early stages. That followed a night of intensified bombing and airstrikes in the north of the enclave. No casualty figures have been released as all communications in Gaza remain down. The military, though, is advising residents to relocate immediately amid intense hostilities.
For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to temporarily relocate south. Let me repeat. We urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to relocate south immediately. This is a temporary measure. Moving back to northern Gaza will be possible once the intense hostilities end.
Well, Israel's released footage showing the interrogation of 2 Hamas operatives who it believes were involved in the attacks earlier this month. In the video, the suspects can be heard discussing the use of the Shifa hospital as a hideout for Hamas terrorists. The Israeli Defense Forces said yesterday the hospital was being used to hide command posts and entry points into an underground network of tunnels. One person's been arrested after a police officer was assaulted during a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London. The Met Police says the officer was being taken to hospital following the incident. Around 100,000 people are thought to be on the streets of the capital demanding a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Protesters have been heard chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," despite controversy around the slogan's meaning. The Met had warned officers would intervene if protesters were deemed to be supporting terrorism. There's no relief in sight to a record backlog of Crown Court trials, according to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Max Hill Casey, who is stepping down this month, says a shortage of barristers and judges is clogging up the system. He says cases are at an all-time high, and while the judiciary's been expanded slightly, it's not been enough to alleviate the pressure. Latest figures show more than 65,000 cases are still awaiting trial. A proposal to close rail ticket offices has resulted in the biggest ever response to a public consultation. The RMT union says around 750,000 passengers have had their say ahead of an expected announcement on the future of ticket offices at train stations. The union's head, Mick Lynch, is warning the government against the closures, saying 98% of respondents are opposed to the controversial plan. Around £7 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on renovations at the Speaker's House. Sir Lindsay Hoyle took office in 2019. Since then, more than £1 million a year has been spent on the property, including on staterooms and offices. The figures, which were released in a Freedom of Information request, don't specify how much was spent on furnishings compared to structural improvements. However, the Telegraph understands some of the money's been spent on silverware. It's looking to be a dark and gloomy Halloween weekend with weather warnings in place for parts of England and Scotland. A yellow warning covers Brighton, Canterbury and London. There's possibility of heavy rain there. These pictures posted to social media show some flooding in a popular shopping area of Hastings near the south coast. Warnings also remain in Scotland with some rail services suspended following damage caused by Storm Babbitt. And if you ever waited too long to use a gift voucher, spare a thought for the new owner of this coin. It's one of only 50 created back in 1766. It allowed its owner free access to every show at the Old Vic Theatre in Bristol. Now, it was auctioned by Henry Aldridge and Son a short time ago. It sold for just over £9,000. And despite its age, nearly 260 years old, the Old Vic says it will honour its word to the new owner. So free shows at the Old Vic, if you can afford £9,000 for a coin. And that's it from me. I'll be back with more a little later. Now it's over to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. It's just fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I like to call this one man's junk is another man's treasure. Do you remember this?
Mr. Speaker, it is not too late to save Brexit.
Therefore, I give notice that Boris Johnson is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Well, my friends, good morning, everybody, my friends. Well, we did it. We did it. I say respectfully to our stentorian friend in the blue 12-star hat. That's it. Time to put a sock in the megaphone. Tonight, we are leaving the European Union. The most important thing to say tonight is that this is not an end, but a beginning. This is the moment when the dawn breaks and the curtain goes up on a new act in our great national drama. We must therefore go into a national lockdown which is tough enough to contain this variant. That means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home.
The last place you'd want the Prime Minister to be at a time of national crisis. For Boris Johnson, this now a deeply personal crisis too. His coronavirus symptoms worsening. Tonight he was moved into the intensive care unit.
That was not a party. I was there to...
I haven't said it was a party, Mr. Johnson.
Well, you did actually earlier on. People who say that we were partying in lockdown simply do not know what they are talking about. And I did not wittingly or recklessly mislead Parliament. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. I know that there will be many people who are relieved and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. But them's the breaks.
So after what can only be described as a leadership coup, which resulted in the implosion of the Tory party, Boris was usurped and Liz Truss was elected party as the leader by the party members. But then MPs weren't happy and pretty much overturned the verdict to install Rishi Sunak. Foolishly, they threw Boris away, a leader who achieved one of the biggest ever majorities, and in my view, a leader who could connect with the public like no other, a skill that was hugely underestimated and one that neither Liz nor Rishi possess. Boris disappeared into the ether and sort of kept a relatively low profile until now. But Boris Johnson will be joining GB News in the new year.
Hi folks, Boris Johnson here. I'm excited to say that I'm shortly going to be joining you on GB News, and I'm going to be giving this remarkable new TV channel my unvarnished views on everything from Russia, China, the war in Ukraine, how we meet all those challenges, to the huge opportunities that lie ahead for us, why I think our best days are yet to come, and why, on the whole, the people of the world want to see more global Britain, not less. So join me on GB News for some great British television.
So to all you haters who wanted to see the back of GB News because we've disrupted the, in Adam Bolton's words, the broadcast ecology, we're here to stay. Deal with it. The Tories were foolish to dispose of Boris the way they did, and there isn't a broadcaster out there who would turn down an opportunity to have him on their platform. But we got Boris done. One man's junk is another man's treasure. So before we get stuck into the debates, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel become Labour's undoing? As Israel continues its bombardment of Gaza, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, is facing more scrutiny from members of his party over his stance on the Hamas conflict. But is Starmer's leadership under threat? And will the issues in Israel become their undoing? At 4:50, it's Royal Roundup time, and Angela Levin, royal biographer, will be here to give you the latest from behind the walls. On the menu, American sitcom Family Guy has mocked the Duke and Duchess of Sussex for a second time of them being grifters and receiving millions from Netflix. And then at 5, it's this week's difficult conversation. I'll be speaking to the entrepreneur and educator Buck Angel. Buck is a transsexual man who transitioned 30 years ago, is concerned about the transitioning of children and the implications it will have on them. And he spoke to Brianna, who was forced to transition at just 13 years old. Have a listen to this.
After the bottom surgery failed, they cut off all contact, and I found out a few weeks ago they wiped all of my medical records. They wiped my clinical summaries. There's no information about what happened to me.
So that is coming up in the next hour. You won't want to miss that. Tell me what you think as ever on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour advisor Matthew Lala.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Well, look, I'm going to have to start with the lovely Lizzie because, of course, Boris Johnson. You know.
Oh, well, I'm so happy. Do you know, when I heard the news, I was so happy. I jumped in the air and stubbed my toe. And I was in agony. But I'm
You're like your mum.
I am like my mother. Get very excited. Now, this is great news, because you know what Boris is? Boris is box office, and everyone is going to tune in. For me, this is what he's great. He's a great showman. Yeah. And I, for one, really miss him. In fact, the whole of the Conservative Party miss him. Yeah. I think even Rishi would want him back. You know, I mean, honestly, I really do. And we've really missed Boris, and I've missed him in every sense, his leadership and everything about him. He brings a smile to my face, and I know all the viewers and listeners are really excited about it here at GB News.
I mean, they'll even watch just for the hell of it. Even if you didn't like Boris, you'd probably still just have a sneaky peek. Matthew Lala.
Well, look, I don't agree with Boris on many things, but I do agree that his box office and he's a great signing for GB News, because people want to hear what he's got to say. And that's what this channel is all about. It's about people having conversations and often disagreements. And, you know, it's allowing things to be said that other channels won't say, even when they annoy us, annoy some of us, or the other way around. So it's going to be great, and I think people are going to really look forward to hearing what he's got to say. Not, as he said in the clip, really interestingly, not just about the UK, but about the world and how Britain relates to the world in a very changing situation. So I think it's very exciting news.
He's had some very exciting moments, actually. I've got one that I wanted to remind you of. This is when he was talking about a Tesla, and there's quite an interesting clip. I wonder if we've got that, if we can play it, because we were supposed to get that ready. Is it there? We had a little clip. So this is one of my favourite moments.
Favourite Boris moments.
Have a listen to this.
The pace of change is now going to accelerate like a new Tesla, because I can tell you, as a former motoring correspondent, EVs may not burble like sucking doves, and they may not have that rum, rum, rah, rah that you love, but they have...
He's
a character.
I think the public are going to realise how much they really do miss Boris, because he was so funny. And he had great one-liners. You know, him with Keir Starmer, Captain Hindsight.
Oh, well, yeah.
He had such good lines, something that, sadly, Rishi doesn't have.
Yeah. I mean, he loves words, doesn't he?
He
Because
loves
he's a
words.
journalist. So, I mean, he's got a great turn of phrase, whether you love him or loathe him. I have to say, though, I wouldn't want to be the producer who's got to tell him he's got 5 seconds to go to the break. That might be quite scary.
Well, I think we'll probably have a pre-record when that.
It may be wise. It may be
Will
wise.
he brush his hair? My mum used to always say, I wish he brushed his hair. But we love Boris, you know, and he is box office, and he's a showman. And what a show to be on, and what the best channel.
I bet the others thought, oh, God, they've got Boris. Because, of course, you know, Piers Morgan was the big name, and Talk TV got Piers Morgan. And then, you know, there wasn't really... But Boris is, I think...
Well, it was a good-kept secret. I mean, usually I get to know. I was shocked.
No, absolutely. Even those of us who spend a lot of time here giving our views, we're really excited, you know, to hear the news. And as you say, what was interesting is it was a big story. It wasn't just in the media pages. From the Financial Times to the Daily Star, they were all... It was all on the front page of their websites as soon as it came out.
I have friends in America, from Dubai. Everyone was ringing me about it, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I'm doing actually a launch party for Boris. So,
are you?
Yes.
Are we invited?
You are very much so,
Is it bring a bottle?
Yeah.
I bet like party games. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. I couldn't resist it.
Well, listen, I'd love to hear what you think at home, whether you're pleased about the fact that Boris is joining us or not. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet us at GBNews. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel's be Labour's undoing? I've currently got a poll up on X right now asking you that very question. Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. The question is, will Israel be Labour's undoing? So send me your thoughts and cast your vote now.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's
t-shirt.
your new t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
18 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. It's time, though, for the great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel be Labour's undoing? Sir Keir Starmer is facing growing pressure from within the Labour Party as 150 Labour Muslim councillors have signed a letter to the party leader urging him to call for an immediate ceasefire. Now, this comes as London Mayor Sadiq Khan and Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar have both released videos calling for a ceasefire in the conflict, piling pressure onto the Labour leader. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has remained relatively calm and on the same page as the Prime Minister on the issue, but much of the anger has been to some of his supporters within the party who believe in Palestine and believe in the cause. Following critics and the crisis talks on Wednesday with Labour's Muslim MP cohort in a bid to keep the party intact, Starmer released a statement outlining how aid to Gaza was completely insufficient and had to be urgently ramped up. However, senior figures abandoning the party policy is threatening the party's unity and is proving to be Sir Keir Starmer's greatest leadership test yet. So, for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel be Labour's undoing? So joining me now to discuss is Anne Widdecombe. She's a member of Reform UK, Gary Mond, chairman of the Jewish National Assembly, and Stephen Pound, former Labour MP. Right, I'm going to start with you. Gary Mond, what do you take on that?
My take on that is that the majority of the Labour Party are not with Keir Starmer on this. There's actually one interesting group of people that hasn't been referred to, and that is Labour's prospective parliamentary candidates who are in potentially winnable seats to the next election. Currently, Labour's got 200 MPs. Most opinion polls think they'll end up with 400 to 450 after the next election. What do the 200 to 250 potential future Labour MPs think? And I strongly suspect that they're very much opposed to Keir Starmer's view. There is, regrettably, substantial support for Hamas and Palestinian nationalism within the Labour Party, and it's very much against the interests of the State of Israel.
But Gary, seeing that, and as you said just there's a lot of seemingly support for the Palestinian cause within the party. Do you think then, especially with the troubles that they've had with anti-Semitism, that this could be something that could destabilise the party?
I think that there is a strong possibility that Labour will appear very divided on this, and destabilising is probably the right word to use. Yes, I'm old enough to remember a situation in 1981 when Labour won a GLC election and the candidate who actually was their leader was removed in favour of Ken Livingstone. And I'm just wondering whether Keir Starmer might be in trouble if, after he wins a general election, whether there might actually be an attempt to remove him on this very issue.
Well, that's if he wins it. Anne Widdecombe, what's your thought?
Well, obviously, this is not making his life any easier, and he is between a rock and a hard place. Whichever way he goes, he's going to upset the others. And I think, therefore, it's got to be a question of principle. He's got to stay where he is on the issue, which is in favour of the Israeli action, but also in favour of getting humanitarian aid to Gaza. That's perfectly compatible. But the question really is, how much is this going to gain traction between now and the next general election? I know the previous two speakers spoke about the general election, but the fact is that it's not due probably until next October, and that's a very long time. I mean, in that time, we'll probably have the ground invasion, then we're going to have the aftermath. And the aftermath could be even more challenging than the present situation. So, yes, I think he's in trouble. But if he can show strength over this one, it will do him some good. But yes, he is in trouble.
But he's already wavering, though, because he's sort of, you can sort of see him sort of trying to soften his stance now, and he's worried about the party. I mean, Stephen Pound, what's your thoughts on it?
I have to say, Nana, my first reaction is, compared to the absolute utter horror of what Hamas has committed in Israel and what is happening in Gaza today, the internal machinations of the Labour Party seem utterly irrelevant. But this is the question you're asking. You're quite entitled to ask this very question. The answer is it will not cause the downfall of the Labour Party. It will not affect our chances. We're actually up to 29 points leads in today. However, it is a very, very unfortunate and unhappy reminder of how life was under the Corbyn era. And we don't need that. But what's important is that we actually start to discuss the realities. People are calling for a ceasefire, are reacting emotionally and understandably. But you know and I know that we can have a ceasefire tomorrow if Hamas would release prisoners, release the hostages, and say we will sit down, or sorry, Iran would actually instruct Hamas to sit down and talk about a two-state solution. Until then, we've got an emotional spot instead of a detailed, respectful political position.
Well, I mean, it is a bit of a nonsense, Gary, that people are calling for a ceasefire, because a ceasefire, it's unlikely that Hamas will take any notice of that. So what you're asking is for Israel to lay down its arms and allow Hamas to carry on. So it does seem a bit odd, but there are those within the party, the Labour Party, that are calling for that, and people resigning as a result of that. And I think that the optics for someone who's thinking about voting for them, especially somebody who's in, support of Israel, whilst they may feel that Keir Starmer is honourable and they agree with him, they might look at the party and think, well, hang on a minute, if it's filled with people who actually want to support Palestine, perhaps I don't want to vote for them. Gary, do you think that's...
I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. But there is an added point to make here, and that is that Hamas will not release hostages unless they get something for it. And what they're looking for is something like between 5,000 and 6,000 terrorists who are held in Israeli jails to be released in exchange for the hostages. That's what they're angling towards. And that is something that I don't believe the Israeli government would ever agree to. And I certainly wouldn't support it.
But we can't trust them anyway. They might say that, but then even if... I mean, is there a track record that they would actually honour the commitment if these 5,000 prisoners were released? I doubt it.
No. You summed it up earlier on. The idea of a ceasefire, it sounds a good optic, but the Israelis would feel that they have lost the war if they agreed to a ceasefire now, because what you'd be doing is you would be leaving Hamas intact, giving it a chance to rearm and regroup, to only attack again in a year or 2 years from now on a scale that may be even worse than happened on the 7th of October. And that must not be allowed to happen. Hamas must be destroyed.
But is it realistic? I want to bring Jake Wallace in now. Jake Wallace-Simmons, he's the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. Jake, is it realistic, though, I'm behind Israel 100% because I feel that you have to do what you need to do. I don't want anyone to die, but I do believe that Israel has absolutely every right to defend itself. I also don't believe I'm in any position to tell or dictate to Israel what that defence should be. And, of course, I want them to be considerate to the humans that will be caught up in all of this. That's how it has to be, in my view. But do you feel that even if Israel go in and they supposedly destroy Hamas, is that objective actually realistic?
I think that we need to look at other examples throughout history where, in particular, I'm thinking of Operation Against Islamic State. And in 2016-17 and thereafter, the RAF and other allies from the Americans and the Iraqis and so on engaged in a very, very robust operation, if I can use that word, against Islamic State. In the Battle of Mosul alone, in 2017-18, 11,000 civilians were killed after a sea pounding by the RAF and the Iraqis going in. And now we don't face as much of an Islamic State threat as we used to. It's, to all intents and purposes, it has been destroyed. There are pockets of Islamic State in Africa and in the Middle East, but they are not functioning in the same way as they were, which is as a proper pseudo-government and a standing army, pseudo-standing army. I think that we could hope it would be the same thing in Gaza, or the Israelis, although it's not going to be easy.
And do you think that Sir Keir Starmer within the Labour Party, do you think that what's happening within the Labour Party and the fact that people are resigning because of his stance, do you think that that's a risk for the Labour Party and that it could actually destabilise them?
I think it's a massive risk. There was some YouGov polling which came out last week, which showed that whereas amongst Conservative voters, about 40% of people supported the Israelis against something like 6% in favour of the Palestinians. When it comes to Labour voters, it's pretty much the opposite. I think it was 27% supported the Palestinians and about 9% supported the Israelis. And those figures are going to have become even more extreme over the last week since, with the protests and everything else. So Labour leadership is in a very different position compared to the grassroots of the party's Labour voting.
Yeah.
Now, there is a further bit of polling being carried out which shows that people have a very dim view of Hamas across the board. But that's not really what this is becoming. This is becoming about Israel versus Palestine, if you like, in those crude terms. People are forgetting that it's about this terror group, which is akin to Islamic State and what they did. So I think this does represent a very serious problem for the Labour leadership. Keir Starmer has tried very hard to move his party to the centre, to root out, in his terms, anti-Semitism from his party, certainly from the parliamentary party. But this is a stark reminder of just how far there is still to go in terms of the Labour voters, the electorate, the people who would get his MPs into office and him over the line as Prime Minister. Is a serious, serious problem.
But also, and a final word to you, Anne, we've also got Sadiq Khan, and of course you've got the Labour leader in Scotland as well, Anna Sawa, all, sort of putting pressure on Sir Keir Starmer. And they've got quite a population underneath them who they're representing.
Indeed, and it is all putting pressure on him. And as I said, it's not making his life any easier. But this is now a test for Starmer. Is he going to try and appease everybody, which is completely impossible in the current situation, or is he going to say clearly this is not about Palestine, it's about terrorism? That's what we're dealing with. That's why I support the government. That's what he should say. And that's why I'm continuing with the line I'm taking. But that is the challenge for him. He's not terribly stalwart in times of challenge. We've seen him going for policy reverse after policy reverse. That's the normal way he goes. This time he can't. This time he has got to take a very clear line and stick to it and tell his party.
Well, it'll be interesting. Well, it'll be interesting if he does. Well, so final question to each of you, yes or no. Will the Israel situation be Labour's undoing? Anne Widdecombe, yes or no?
Possible.
Stephen Pound, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely no. Jake Wallace, yes or no?
Jake Wallace-Simons. I think it has been Labour's undoing over the years. Whether it will be the final death blow, I don't think so. I think Starmer will struggle on. He can't be decapitated at this point. Let's wait and see what happens at the election.
Yeah, well, interesting. And what about you, Gary Mond, yes or no?
Not right now, but it might well be a few months from now.
Oh, really? So you think potentially it will be the overall party's undoing? Interesting. Thank you very much.
It will cause major problems.
Jake Wallace-Simons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle, and Widdecombe, member of Reform UK, Gary Mond, chairman for the Jewish National Assembly, and Stephen Pound, former Labour MP. Thank you very much. Well, what do you think? Do you think the issues surrounding Israel will be Labour's undoing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel be Labour's undoing? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Lizzie Cundy and also Matthew Laza. But still to come, this week's difficult conversation. Now, my guest is a transsexual man who's worried about modern trans activists indoctrinating minors and pushing them into transitioning. You will not want to miss that. Stay with me. That's coming up at 5 o'clock. But first, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
It's 4:32. Let's get you up to date with the latest headlines. Israel's exchanged fire with militants on its northern border with Lebanon as fears grow the conflict in the Middle East will escalate. Sirens have been heard in northern Israel. Anti-tank missiles were fired towards Israeli army near the border with Lebanon. Tanks and artillery Fire have been sent in response towards Hezbollah military infrastructure. Earlier, Israel said its troops remain in the field in Gaza, suggesting a ground offensive is in its early stages. It follows a night of intense bombing and airstrikes in the north of the enclave. No casualty figures have been released. All communications in Gaza remain down. The military is advising residents to relocate immediately. Meanwhile, in London, one person's been arrested after a police officer was assaulted during a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London. The Met Police says the officer has been taken to hospital following the incident. Around 100,000 people have been taking to the streets of the capital and other UK cities to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Some protesters have been heard chanting "from the river to the sea," despite the controversy around the slogan's meaning. The Met's warned officers will intervene if protesters are deemed to be supporting terrorism. And it looks like it may well be a dark, gloomy Halloween weekend. Weather warnings are in place for some parts of England and Scotland. These pictures are from Hastings. They show flooding in a popular shopping area of the town on the south coast. And a rain warning covers Brighton, Canterbury and London. There are also warnings in some parts of Scotland. Rail services have been suspended, all following the damage caused by Storm Babette. More on all of our stories on our website, gbnews.com. I'll be back with a full bulletin at the top of the next hour. Now, over to Nana.
Thank you, Aaron. So coming up, an interview that you will not want to miss. I'll be speaking to Buck Angel. Now, he's a sexual entrepreneur and an educator. He's concerned with the transitioning of children. And in his latest podcast, here he is talking to Brianna. She's a trans woman who began her medical transition at just 13. Yes, 13. Have a listen.
You should never be dealing with something like this, ever. It's a shame.
Yeah. And these doctors know it. Yeah. And that's something that I thought about a lot, and what I'm really going to go after is they are well aware that all of these medical interventions, hormone replacement as a kid, and even doing a completely experimental bottom surgery on me that has no research for any trans patient.
Well, stay tuned. That is on the way at 5. You won't want to miss it. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon. If you've just joined us, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. It's completely free. You can check out all the programmes on the channel. I'm Nana Akua. But it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, will issues surrounding Israel be Labour's undoing? So Keir Starmer is facing growing pressure from within the Labour Party to take a stronger stance and demand a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But he's yet to call for a ceasefire. And meanwhile, Labour councillors are resigning over it. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, will issues that surround Israel be Labour's undoing? So let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. I'm going to come straight to Matthew first. Because this is not looking good for the Labour Party.
Look, there's no denying that this is a difficult moment for Keir Starmer and that his handling of it will be a real test of his leadership. I think that he can weather this storm and I think he's going to come out stronger the other side, but it is a big test for him when he comes under increasing pressure from various parts of the party.
Well, you say that, but you're talking as though it's all about him. I'm talking about the party as a whole, because actually the optics from someone who's looking at him thinking, oh, I might vote for the Labour Party, then they see them, especially if someone is sort of more pro-Israel, seeing that lots of members are actually pro-Palestine, might make people think, hang on a minute.
Yeah, I think what's happened is Keir Starmer gave this interview about 2 weeks ago in which he appeared to misspeak and he appeared to give a sort of blank cheque to Israel, and what that did is it gave a kind of chink that some people are trying to use to call for a ceasefire. Stephen Pound said in the debate earlier, a ceasefire is just nonsense. And I think I would say too, because it's not going to happen and Hamas wouldn't stick by it, but it is perfectly right to call for humanitarian pauses, which is the position of Rishi Sunak and the British government. So I think that I totally understand how some people in the party, they're not pro-Hamas, they're not pro-Palestine necessarily. Some are pro-Palestine. What they are is that a lot of them are very concerned about about the Israeli blockade, about the lack of electricity and water. So's the British government, so's the United States.
They're calling it sort of like a communal sort of punishment, which is obviously against international law. But ultimate collective punishment, I think, is the term. Yeah. But ultimately, it does seem that Hamas do have oil and all the things they need, but they're just not using it. They're using it to power rockets.
Well, look, I mean, clearly Hamas are an awful bunch of people. We saw what they did, and it seems like an awfully long time ago, but it's just a matter of weeks since this started, and we mustn't lose sight. And I'd say to everybody in the Labour Party that they mustn't lose sight of how visceral this is for people who live in Israel and support Israel.
Lizzie Gundy.
Sadly, that interview you talked about, Matthew, showed everything about Keir Starmer. It showed he's not the right man for the job. He's not right for prime time. He's not right for Prime Minister. Because the thing with Starmer, he can't answer the question unless he's got Peter Mandelson writing the script, or he's got Tony Blair in his ear, or your dear self writing a few one-liners. He doesn't know what to say. He is indeed Captain Flip-Flop. And I'm sad to say we're seeing him in his true colours more and more again. And he can't even answer the question properly because he doesn't know himself. He's scared of spooking the horses. Now, what we've got is trouble for the Labour Party, because over 300 Labour councillors have actually written an open letter condemning Starmer. They're not happy, Matthew, whether you like it or not.
It is out of 6,000.
There's 42% of Labour voters aren't happy with the way he's handled this at all, and there's only 18% of the voters think he's done a good job. So that's quite a majority. I'm sorry to say, he folds like a cheap tent when he's under pressure. He cannot answer a question on his own, and I'm afraid he's no Tony Blair, Matthew.
No, he isn't Tony Blair.
And he's showing it.
And in some ways, yeah, look, I think what this is to prove... I can see that fear you have that he blows with the wind. I think what's going to happen over this...
He doesn't know.
He does know. He's on this, he's absolutely clear. I know on certain things like men and their men/women and their genitals, that some of those answers and the flip-flopping kind of meme took place. On this, he's been super clear, and he will stay firm. I mean, it is the Labour Party will continue to call, as does Rishi Sunak, as does the American government, for aid to get into Gaza. But it absolutely backs Israel's right to defend itself.
But do you get my point about the optics of this?
Yeah, I think the optics...
Because that's the problem. Whether he flip-flops or not, he's softening his stance now. He's sort of moderating his words. We're already into the gentle flip-flop, and I would say that he folds like a cheap deck chair, actually.
I'm not a cheap deck.
As long as it's a summary comparison.
I was going to say like a cheap suit, but I do want to.
Am I allowed to name the brand?
I was thinking more deck chair. Because, look, it's the optics. I'm looking at it. Even if I was thinking, oh, maybe I will vote for the Labour Party, I'm thinking, oh, I don't like all the different factions.
Yeah,
you've got Sawa, you've also got Sadiq Khan, of course, and
Bête Noire.
Andy Burnham's coming in.
Andy Burnham.
No, I totally agree.
All people who have...
But look, can I put this to you, Matthew?
Let him answer.
Go on. And then, look, I would say to people like Andy Burnham, who's the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and Anna Sarwar, who's Labour's leader in Scotland. I mean, it's slightly different in the Scottish situation, but for the mayors and councillors, including Sadiq Khan, I mean, somebody came out with a good line yesterday, which is that Sadiq Khan hasn't been stopping gang violence, people killing themselves on the streets of London, as he should be. He should stick to that and not interfere in foreign affairs. So I think they need to give Keir, who's been a great leader so far, and has got the party to a 20-point plus lead in the polls. They need to give Keir, they need to let Keir lead.
But sadly for me, I can't forget that he supported Jeremy Corbyn. He was the one that said he will make, in quotes, a great Prime Minister. And when it was Louise Eldman said to him, you know, he's a dangerous man to the Jewish community, he kept repeating, I do not accept that, I do not accept that. And I'm afraid he's on a sticky wicket. And I tell you what, there's trouble in the Labour Party. You watch.
Well, let's see. Well, we will watch and see. But this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome one of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go over to Bristol. Oh, where's my map gone these days? I have a map that goes over to Lee in Bristol. Oh. Somebody's taken away. Bring the map back. Lee.
Hi, Nana. You know, I broadly actually agree with the panel, but Matthew is very brave to say that Starmer won't change his mind on this. You know, I think Starmer is trying to be the statesman by following the government and the USA's line on the conflict, but he's also trying to show that his party is no longer the unelectable anti-Semitic hellhole that it was under Corbyn. And the far-left Corbynistas that still make up a large proportion of the membership, including a few MPs, have been relatively quiet until now. You know, what impact this will have on the next election is still uncertain, especially as Keir Starmer is an unprincipled political weather vane, Matthew. He also changes his mind depending on what day it is. But it, you know, genuinely could be significant if you look at the numbers. As we discussed last week, based on the recent by-election losses, it showed unequivocally that it wasn't that more people were voting Labour, it was unhappy Tory voters staying at home. And this could well be the case with Muslim voters not going out to vote Labour. And I expect the polls to narrow the closer we get to the election. So an outright majority for Labour could well be hanging in the balance, possibly even worse. But there are apparently... I did a bit of research on this. There's apparently 14 times as many Muslims in Britain as there are Jews, and they are strongly pro-Labour. In 2019, nearly 80% of Muslims voted for the party. And if Labour alienates these voters, there could well be serious ramifications at the next election.
Well, it depends.
And
I mean,
also-
if the rest of the country don't like the look of that, then if the rest of the country don't like that, then the rest of the country may vote with their feet and run from Labour. Listen, Lee, it's always a pleasure. A superstar, Lee Harris. He's there. He's our great British voice and so succinct and so precise. All right, so this is GB News coming up to 48 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio on the way. My difficult conversation. Now, I'll be speaking to Buck Angel, a transsexual man and an activist who's worried about kids being pushed into transitioning. It's an interview that's coming up just after 5. You will not want to miss that.
Good afternoon, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So for many, there's been plenty of rain and showers around to start the weekend, and this is all due to this large area of low pressure that's going to bring weather fronts up from the southwest across the UK as we go through this weekend. So already into this afternoon, we've seen further heavy rain and maybe the odd thunderstorm too, making its way northwards. And that's going to continue as we go through tonight, to be followed by further heavy showers, especially for southern and western coasts. Particularly blustery as well around both southern and northern coasts, with the potential for coastal gales. So as we start Sunday, a pretty gloomy and wet start for northern England and most of Scotland, with outbreaks of rain that have made their way northwards overnight. Elsewhere, a continuation of those heavy showers, though fewer are making their way inland and staying more confined to southern and western coasts for the second half of the weekend. So a bit more in the way of sunshine and feeling pleasant in that sunshine, with highs of 14 to 15 in the south. Now, as we move on to the new week, it's a bit of a cloudy start again, with further showers around, but mostly going to be around the coasts. So the further inland you are, the better chance you have of seeing some sunny spells into the new week. Remaining fairly unsettled, though, throughout next week, maybe a bit of respite from the showers on Tuesday and becoming colder in the north.
Right, well, coming up on GB News in the next hour, my Great British Debate, I'm going to be asking, should Alison Rose get a big payout after the Farage debanking scandal? But next, it's time for my Royal Roundup with royal biographer Angela Levin.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for my Royal Roundup, because there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. On the menu, the American sitcom Family Guy has mocked the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, saying that Harry and Meghan received millions from their Netflix grifting. Each Saturday, of course, I love to give you a rundown, and who better to do so than the fabulous royal biographer Angela Levin. So, of course, we have to start with the Family Guy clip.
Yeah.
Angela Levin.
It was so funny. It's one of the things you just sort of laugh out loud. There's this little butler, you know,
we'll play it at the moment.
You will play it at the moment. OK, let people see it.
Should we play it? OK,
first.
so have a listen to this, and if you're at home, watch on the TV. It's Harry and Meghan and South Park, a Family Guy even. Sorry, that was the other one.
Or millions from Netflix for no one knows what.
Put it with the rest of them.
Babe, time to do our daily $250,000 sponsored Instagram post for Del Taco.
I shouldn't have left the made-up nonsense.
So you see, Angela, even Family Guy now, because they're so similar, the cartoons, Family Guy having a pop at them.
Yeah, they don't respect them anymore, actually. They've sort of lost it. And the whole thing in that one sentence about Netflix has given me this for nobody knows what it's for means that they've grabbed money, they haven't worked hard, they don't deserve it. And the move that Harry's got with his arm like that, you know, put it over there with the other. It's just like he moves his arm. So it's really hilarious. It's very well done. But I think Meghan will absolutely be furious about that, because in her own mind, she still thinks she's a global wonder. But this just shows that they are getting very bored with them. And once they do in America, you have to work very hard to stay at the top. You go down and down and downhill. And one of the other things I want to say about Harry is that in 2019, he set up this Travelist, where people wanted to go on holiday, but they would try and look after the place they were going, environmental care. And he's actually knocked it off the spot, hasn't he? He's the patron, but he had these 7 SUVs. He's gone to see sports cars, which guggle up money, oil and very, very bad for the country.
Right, yes.
And he had, you know, he's just not interested anymore, and he won't go on a public plane. It goes on a private plane. And you think, how can you have a patron who's doing absolutely what you don't want?
Well, he's doing absolutely everything he tells you not to do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pointless. But I suppose they still think he's still Prince Harry. But I think that's going downhill, because Meghan is at him all the time. She has to go first. She has to bring him down, speaks first. And it's very difficult. So he no longer has that sort of royal demure attitude that he had years ago.
Although some would argue that, you know, we want to see the man sort of doing what the woman says. So he has become, you know, he's
a servant.
Well,
really.
he's nothing wrong with that, to be honest with you. I'm impressed she's managed it. Thinking, I want to know her secret.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good... but what's lovely, and which is really nice, is that Catherine is now another aunt, and her brother has had a baby. And I think that's lovely, because James has had a very hard time. He had a lot of depression. His businesses failed on 2 occasions, marshmallows and dogs, and he's now found a woman who loves him, and they've got a little boy a couple of weeks ago. They were very quiet on it. It kept very quiet because they didn't sort of leak it. They were just walking down in London and people saw that. So they said the baby had been with them for 2 or 3 weeks, and his face, he was just absolutely so happy. And you think that he can hold together now, you know, a family and be incredibly happy with all those things. And he was very upset about losing a dog, but he's now got something very important in a family. And it'll be lovely for the Middletons, because they've had a hard time with going broke and people writing nasty things about them on trees and things like that.
But at least they may have gone bust, but at least they've got a rich daughter, very rich daughter, so they'll be okay. What about travellers, though, aren't they? Do you think they'll sack Harry?
Well, I think they should, actually. I think if somebody doesn't do anything that actually he came in 2019 to say we all had to do and was very important, and he wanted it to work globally.
Now, travellers, what were they wanting Harry to do? What was his role there?
Well, Harry was the patron, and to encourage people when they went on holiday to make sure they were going to the right place, they weren't going where the planes would be difficult for them, where they upset the animals, that you should be very careful which plane you took to which spot, and so that you respected the land. And, of course, he hasn't done that.
Now, moving on to King Charles, actually, because now this is an interesting story. Talk me through it.
Yes, well, there's a wonderful helper who was in the army, who still is, and Johnny Thompson, and he became every woman's sort of hero because he was guarding the late Queen. He's very handsome, he's very funny, and he devoted to the King. And the King has now improved his condition and is now going to be the #1 who looks after him, helps things going, take visitors through to him, and you know, do all the things that are necessary. When I was at the V&A with the King and Queen and him, I went up to him and I said, "Excuse me, but I just want to know, do you really love all these women who go after you because they think you're so handsome and you're so charming?" He went bright red, which was quite sweet for someone from the army. And he said to me, "Oh, I don't let myself get involved in that." He said, "Because my duty is to..." It was Prince Charles, it was before that, and I want to look after him, and that's what I put my energy for. So I thought, oh,
that makes him even more attractive.
Yeah, exactly.
You're that nice.
He's a real sort of excellent person. But the other thing they did, they put him behind Harry and Meghan. To make sure that they behaved in church.
Very sensible. Well, listen, Angela, always a pleasure. The fabulous Angela Levin. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. So it is 5 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. I am Nana Akua. This is GB News, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up, this week's difficult conversation. I'll be joined by Buck Angel. He's a transsexual man, a speaker, an entrepreneur who transitioned 30 years ago and is concerned with the transitioning of children and the misrepresentation of transsexualism in our society. You will not want to miss that. An incredible story. But after that, it's time for the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, should Dame Alison Rose get to keep her big payout after the whole Nigel Farage debanking scandal at some 11 million? Send me your thoughts, as ever, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at GBNews. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
Very good evening to you. It's 5:01. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. Gaza has suffered its heaviest bombardment since the conflict began, with artillery fire and airstrikes pounding the enclave in the last few hours. Israel says its forces are still in the field, attacking above and below ground as part of its expanded offensive against Hamas. All communications in Gaza remain blacked out, meaning no new casualty figures have been released. The military says trucks carrying food, water and medical supplies will be allowed in, raising hopes of a pause in the fighting. But aid agencies say a humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding, with all residents again told to relocate immediately amid intense hostilities.
For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to temporarily relocate south. Let me repeat. We urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to relocate south immediately. This is a temporary measure. Moving back to northern Gaza will be possible once the intense hostilities end.
Air raid sirens and missiles have been heard in Tel Aviv. Well, these pictures show a series of missiles launched from Gaza towards the Israeli city being intercepted by the Iron Dome defences. There are reports that one rocket may have struck an area in the east of the city, but it is unclear if there are any casualties. One person's been arrested after a police officer was assaulted during a pro-Palestine demonstration in central London. The Met Police says the officer's been taken to hospital following the incident. Around 100,000 people have taken to the streets of the capital, demanding a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Protesters have been heard chanting a number of slogans, including "From the river to the sea," despite controversy around the slogan's meaning. The Met has warned officers will intervene if protesters are deemed to be supporting terrorism. There's no relief in sight to a record backlog of Crown Court trials, according to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Max Hill Casey, who's stepping down this month, says a shortage of barristers and judges is clogging up the system. He says cases are at an all-time high, and while the judiciary's been expanded slightly, it's not been enough to alleviate the pressure. Latest figures show more than 65,000 cases are still awaiting trial. A proposal to close rail ticket offices has resulted in the biggest ever response to a public consultation. The RMT union says around 750,000 passengers have had their say, ahead of an expected announcement on the future of ticket offices at train stations. The union's head, Mick Lynch, is warning the government against the closures, saying 98% of respondents are opposed to the controversial plan. Around £7 million worth of taxpayers' money has been spent on renovations at the Speaker of the House of Commons' residence. Sir Lindsay Hoyle took the office in 2019. Well, since then, more than £1 million has been spent on the property, including staterooms and offices. The figures, which were released in a Freedom of Information request, don't specify how much has been spent on furnishings compared to structural improvements. However, the Telegraph is reporting some of the money has been spent on silverware. Now, it might be a fairly dark and gloomy Halloween weekend, I'm afraid. Weather warnings are in place for parts of England and Scotland. A yellow warning is covering Brighton, Canterbury and London. The possibility of heavy rain then in the south of England. These pictures posted to social media. This is at a popular shopping area of Hastings down on the south coast. There are also warnings in Scotland. Some rail services have been suspended following damage caused by Storm Babbitt. And if you ever waited too long to use a gift voucher, well, spare a thought for the new owner of this coin. It's one of only 50 tokens ever made, created in 1766. And back then it allowed its owner free access to every show at the Old Vic Theatre in Bristol. Now, it was auctioned by Henry Aldridge and Son a short time ago. It sold for just over £9,000. And despite its age, nearly 260 years old, the Old Vic says it will honour its word to the new owner. This is GB News on digital radio, on TV and on your smart speaker too. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Ray. Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. Still to come, my difficult conversation today is all about transitioning of children. Now, the difficulties surrounding it and why we as a society need to do better in protecting and advising kids before they make life-altering permanent changes to their body. The sexual entrepreneur and educator Buck Angel has been speaking to victims of this in his podcast. Take a listen.
And so now I'm 22, and I'm like, I have my entire adult life, but I have no sexual function. So what does that mean in a relationship? Now I want a family. I can't do that. I want to be in a long-term relationship, but I have no sexual desire, no sexual feelings. I don't even know what that feels like. So I don't really know how to do any of that.
That was Buck Angel speaking to Brianna, and I'll be speaking to him in just a moment. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Dame Alison Rose get to keep her big payout following the Nigel Farage debanking scandal? It's some 11 million. Miss Rose is set to receive a massive 2.4 million after she stepped down over the way Coots closed down Nigel Farage's account. Dame Alison could also benefit from additional bonuses totalling up to 10 million as she leaves Nat West. But do you think that she deserves that big payout as part of a sort of goodbye package? It's going to come out of our taxes, of course, or part of it at least. As ever, you can get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So now it's time for this week's difficult conversation. Buck Angel was born female in Los Angeles, but as a child, he did not conform to gender stereotypes and began transitioning to male over 30 years ago to combat feelings of gender dysphoria. He worked as an adult entertainer and has gone on to advocate for trans rights and educate people about self-acceptance and redefining gender. Now Buck is speaking out against the transitioning of children and the affirmative approach many doctors are taking to gender. Just days ago, Buck spoke to Brianna, a 22-year-old transsexual woman who began transitioning when she was 13 years old. Yes, you heard that right, just 13. Here's a reminder of what she said.
And so now I'm 22, and I'm like, I have my entire adult life, but I have no sexual function. So what does that mean in a relationship? Now I want a family. I can't do that. I want to be in a long-term relationship, but I have no sexual desire, no sexual feelings. I don't even know what that feels like. So I don't really know how to do any of that.
Wow. So I'm joined now by speaker, entrepreneur and educator Buck Angel. Buck, thank you so much for joining me. Honestly, I came across you on X and checked all of a lot of things you've done on YouTube, and it is astonishing, really, what is happening. So can you talk me through sort of your experience first, because, of course, you suffered with gender dysphoria. Can you talk about you, because a lot of people might not know your backstory?
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me. I totally appreciate you seeing what I'm doing in this insane world. I laugh so I don't cry. It's just so crazy. So I am a transsexual man. I was born female 61 years ago, and I transitioned to live my life as a male. I am still a biological female. That being said, I transitioned as an adult. And what I'm seeing today with the transitioning of children, it goes against everything we have done in the transsexual community for as long as I've been a part of it. And it's disturbing. And, you know, I kind of feel like I had to step up as an elder in the community and start to voice my opinion about this. You know, I had a great childhood. I did not have a bad childhood. And I do believe that kids need to find themselves where they make such a drastic choice. And this is not something I can change. I will forever look this way, and I will forever be this way. But I made that choice as an adult.
When you transitioned, how far did you go? Because a lot of, I mean, listening to Brianna, we've played lots of clips of that throughout the programme already. And, of course, she says that now she has no sexual function at all, which is horrendous. And she's only 22. What a horrendous thing to have to then deal with throughout your life. I mean, did you go through those procedures yourself?
So when I transitioned, nobody else was transitioning. 30 years ago, we didn't have the internet, really. And so I didn't even know what I was doing. I did it very blindly on some level. And when I did, the only surgery I've ever done is my top surgery, which what we call basically a double mastectomy. I removed my breasts 28 years ago. But I did not do what we call the bottom surgery, which is genital surgery. Today, I'm very grateful I didn't do that because, as you see, there are huge implications by making that choice, and they still do not have the genital surgery to where it's a functioning, normal space. Many people have a lot of problems with that surgery.
Yeah, I mean, it is there by the grace of God that you did not do that, because I think this seems to be an issue. Because I think, right, if people don't feel that they're the right gender, and what's happening in this country at the moment, I think we are slightly behind you, but I think we are following the United States. Because I was just reading here about teachers affirming the gender pronouns. So saying to the children when they go in, are you, do you still feel like you're, what is your gender? And keep asking the children that. And eventually they sort of think, oh, children start questioning themselves. Do you think that we should stop all this gender pronoun thing?
Oh, 100% I do. Look, I was a kid who dealt with some, you could call it dysphoria, you could call it whatever. I was a tomboy. Kids are constantly changing their minds. They're constantly going in and out of what they want. Me and you both, everyone in the world knows that. Let's just be honest here. You cannot say that a child is trans when we don't understand what they're actually going through. We're not even looking at other different sort of comorbidities or mental health issues they might be having. There's all kinds of things kids are going through. And I personally do not believe we have trans kids. I believe these are kids who could be dealing with dysphoria like me, but at a certain point in time, most of these kids will grow out of that if we just let them be and stop pushing them into a space that, I mean, we have a huge rate of detransitioner. And that is something this community does not want to talk about. And I interview them, I talk to them, because they are the one reason why we should not be transitioning children.
Mm. What do you think? Because listening to that podcast and listening to your interview with Brianna, she believed that she would actually be able to become a biological woman. So she believed that now. And there is this forcing of language and forcing women to call trans women women. And I always say, look, surely if you're a trans woman, own the space. There's nothing wrong with being a trans woman. Why do you have to say that you're a woman? You're not a woman. And what's your view on that element of language that's being shifted?
So I'll tell you what, I'm not considered somebody that in the trans community everybody's happy with, but I'm not here to be popular. I'm here because I believe in my own integrity, and I believe in my transition helped me become a better human being as an adult. I disagree with forcing people to use language that's uncomfortable for them. People call me she all the time, Nana. I mean, look at me. It's kind of funny. I mean, I can brush it off because I've learned to deal with the reality of the world. Not everybody's going to be okay with me. And because I'm okay with that, I walk the world so happy. But I think we're teaching with this pronoun and with this really idea that trans women are women. Trans women are not women. Trans women are biological males who live like women, like me. I'm a biological female who lives my life as a male. It's very simple. And once you do that, the world embraces you, because I'm not coming here to lie to you. I'm coming here to tell you I have a mental disorder called gender dysphoria that I needed to get help for. I got the medical intervention, and now I walk the world as Buck. I don't walk the world as a trans man. That's the other thing. These people are using trans as an identity. This is an actual medical condition that needs medicalization in order to move forward.
So what do you think about the affirmation of this to children when they, because they're affirming this instead of actually medicalizing it in a sense and treating it like, as you said, a mental kind of condition?
That's right. So no, that's what I'm saying. Affirmation therapy is not therapy. That's indoctrination. And I want everybody to understand here, I'm not the only transsexual who feels this way. There's many of us. But as you know, we have cancel culture, and we have a lot of very angry people in the trans activist community who do very dangerous things. So many people don't want to stand up and speak out like me. I'm in a very good position to be able to do this because many people, like yourself, hear me and understand what I'm trying to do. You cannot force children into a space and think at the long term they are going to be okay with that. You're going to start to see more and more of these young people detransitioning, like the young 22-year-old woman, trans woman I just interviewed. She feels like if she would have just been left alone, she might have found her space and who knows, maybe lived as a gay man. But now she has no sexual functioning. She can't even have any intimate relationship with anybody at 22.
Frightening, isn't it? Awful. What a terrible, terrible thing to take away from someone. And she's probably never experienced sex because it happened, she started taking these puberty blockers. So what is your view then on the puberty blockers and the process that people suddenly get put on to? Is it time to stop, in your view, using puberty blockers and things like that?
100%. We do not have any studies, actually in the EU, including UK, they have shut it all down. Everyone shut it down. They know. They don't see the long-term studies. They see the problems happening with these young people. They understand it. Here in the United States, we are ramping it up full force. And that says to me, there is something very sinister going on here because these are children, everybody. We're not talking about an adult who can make a choice. Any adult can make choices they need to do. They might make a mistake, but that's being an adult. All of us as adults are doing a disservice to these children because we are not understanding kids need time. They need time to figure out who they are. It could be their sexuality. It could be their gender. It could also be other things going on with them, that they're having depression, anxiety, but we're just shoving them into a space. Puberty blockers do not work. They have long-term horrible effects. That woman I just interviewed told you everything. She was on puberty blockers. Now she has nothing. Zero.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And what would you... We're running out of time, Buck. So good to talk to you. What advice would you give to a parent who is dealing with a child who is gender dysphoric or suffering with their gender identity?
Yeah. First, I want to tell the parent that I feel for you. I understand the position you're in, but I would really, really, really request that you take your time and you get lots of different opinions. Do not just listen to one doctor, and do not take your child to affirmation therapy. Take your child to a real therapist who will push back on your child and give your child time to understand, maybe I'm just going through something. Big deal, you're a girl who wants to be a boy. That's totally okay. Put on a different hat, put on a shirt. But once you start medicalizing, there's no turning back.
Buck Angel, such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being on my show. I really appreciate it. Fantastic. And don't forget, you can check out Buck's podcast if you look for him on YouTube. Search for Buck Angel. He's a speaker, entrepreneur and educator. This is GB News. It's fast approaching 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And we'll be looking at Dame Alison Rose, because a review has found that Nat West Group's decision to debank Nigel Farage was lawful. Really? So should Dame Alison Rose get her multi-million-pound payout? Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. It's time now, though, for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should Dame Alison Rose get her big payout after the Farage debanking scandal? Now, the former Nat West boss is up for a payout of worth $2.4 million. That's after she stepped down following a row over the way the bank closed Nigel's accounts. Well, sort of thing, but she sort of broke the banking code as well, so that's sort of what happened there. Dame Alison is also set to benefit from bonuses and share awards, which could push the amount up to nearer 10 million quid, which has been branded as a bit of a sick joke by the former UKIP leader. Yesterday, an independent review revealed that the closure of Farage's account did not follow the bank's policies, but the decision was lawful for predominantly commercial reasons. The GB News presenter has described the report as a whitewash. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Dame Alison Rose get a big payout after the Farage debanking scandal? Well, joining me now to discuss, personal finance and credit expert and CEO of Fair Money, Roger Gewolb, also Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, Vicky Price, Chief Economic Advisor for the Centre of Economic and Business Research, and Peter Edwards, the former editor for the Labour List. I'm going to start with you, Roger. Should she get this money? And if so, why?
I think there are two questions. One is legal and the other is ethical. The legal question is, one would have to see the actual terms of her contract and have all the facts of the case, as the lawyers will, to know whether she's actually breached her employment terms or not. But
didn't she break the banking code, though? I mean, surely that would be...
She has caused 2 breaches of the Data Protection Act, and I would think that generally, I was just going on to say, that would be enough to be a breach of any employment contract. The second thing is ethical, and in that respect, I mean, I think that Dame Allison should come out personally or through her representatives with an explanation and a statement to us, because we own much of that bank and it's our money, and tell us why she thinks she's justified when she's dropped the bank into such a scandal, receiving such a large payout. I mean, I've had arguments with bosses once or twice in my career. I was even unfairly sacked once, but I'll tell you, I would happily resign from any job by mutual agreement for 10 million quid.
Yeah, who wouldn't? Vicky Price.
Well, I look at it slightly differently. I'm not an expert. I'm not an employment expert or a lawyer. But I think more generally, when you look at this, first of all, it's rather bad for women, because Alison Rose was she was the most senior businesswoman in the city, and it's a shame to lose her. She was also one of the very few CEOs we have in the FTSE 100. The second worry that I have is that it's become so political. The board was quite happy to keep her going, and yet, from what we understand, there was a lot of pressure from Number 10 and elsewhere that she should go. And then suddenly we heard that she was going at the early hours of, I can't remember what it was. Certainly it was after hours. So that's the other issue. Which is really a problem if you're looking at any decisions that can be made, based on this. And really, the most interesting thing for me when you look at what has materialized, yes, of course, the figures are rather large, and that's precisely what's a bit worrying. That what this has exposed is the very large payouts that there are in business and also in the city. And if you look at the actual salaries that people get, given particularly now that we have this cost of living crisis, they're eye-watering. These sums are eye-watering, and they come, of course, after bankers' bonuses have now been de-controlled. So we're now going to have even bigger increases coming in the future.
But the point is that she, as Roger said, she broke a couple of rules there. So should she actually be getting that money? I mean, what do you think? Yes or no? Do you think she should be getting that full payout, in your view?
In my view, if the contract that she has allows that to happen because of the reasons that she has gone, not being perhaps gross misconduct but something else, then she should get it.
All right, Dennis McShane.
I'm very happy to see any bankster lose their bonuses. I completely agree with Vicky. They've done so much damage to Britain in recent years. They're debanking the entire country, not just dear old Nigel. What he was doing in Coots, the bank of the royal family, the aristocrats, what is he, the Earl of something, the Duke of Farage?
What's that got to do with it?
Well, very simply, he runs after all these posh boys who, for various reasons, and then they just treat him with contempt. I have been debanked. I've had 2 accounts closed by high street banks, Lloyds and Co-op. Did I run moaning to the media? No.
Well, you should have done and exposed the scandal. If you'd exposed that...
Perhaps I should.
Very brave of Nigel to do that.
They're not brave. Nigel brave?
It was very brave of him.
If he gets huge publicity, then he gets very courageous.
No, but he lost... Listen, 10 banks refused to give him an account, and he could have literally... I mean, with that, you cannot live, really, without a bank account.
So Nigel's not going to be on the street looking for a few free lunch.
Well, you might be if you can't use a credit card or you can't get your own money. I think you're wrong there.
You cannot, under law, not have a simple plain bank account, probably like the ones you and I have, without a lot of extra money in
10 banks refused to give him an account, and those are basic banks.
OK, then they are, frankly, stupid, and if he's naming them, good luck to him naming them. I really think our banking structure in Britain, the industry, is worse than any I know in Europe. It's on a par with bits of Silicon Valley, and all the American banks are just so dodgy. I like Nigel loads, but honestly, Nigel, this isn't the Mount Sinai to die on.
Well, he's not dying on the mountain. In fact, he's doing very well off the mountain. Exactly. But I'd like to see more being done. Peter Edwards.
Well, I don't think there should be a payout. Dame Allison broke the rules, and we all make mistakes in life, and we have to be frank about that. We all make mistakes, but the bank had an opportunity to correct that mistake in terms of the original BBC story, and it didn't do so immediately. And I think one of the other contributors mentioned politics and party politics. Well, the Information Commissioner is a neutral figure that found the CEO breached data protection rules twice. Then look at it more broadly in terms of how banks operate. It's said, we don't know, but it's said that Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, gave a view of disapproval behind the scenes. My criticism actually wouldn't be that the government took a view in this case. My view would be that over the last decade or more, the government should have been more interventionist in something that's 38% owned by the taxpayer.
Roger, you're moving on.
I mean, every employment contract, from the lowest employee to the highest, starts with the clause, "Thou shalt not break the law." That's it in a nutshell.
Did she actually break the law?
She broke the data protection law twice, yes.
Well, that's not a criminal offence, Roger, with all due respect.
Neither is an employment contract.
She should not. She briefed a journalist.
It's a civil matter. It's a civil employment contract.
There are dinners going on tonight, lunches tomorrow, meetings on Monday, in which senior political figures and business figures will talk to senior journalists and tell them things that they know because they want the journalists to put it into the public domain.
Yeah, but
I would
she shouldn't be doing that.
But if that's her judgment, I can't believe...
She should be fired.
Especially as a BBC reporter, Simon Jack. Simon Jack phoned her up and said, hey, that thing you told me yesterday, can I use it? Oh, yes, dear boy, of course you can. For God's sake, what world are we living in with people like that are running major banks?
But Peter's right then. Peter, I mean, you know, he's right, isn't he? I mean, she shouldn't get that payout.
We're all saying the same thing, actually.
So let's see, does everybody agree? Peter, do you think that Dame Alison Rose should get this payout?
No, we all make mistakes, but the bank could have corrected it earlier and they didn't, so I'm afraid to break the rules.
Roger.
I'm not saying she shouldn't. I said the first thing was legal, can't judge that without the facts. The second thing is ethics. I think because we own the bank, she should give an explanation herself or through her representative of why she's justified in taking whatever large sum she does.
She wouldn't even notice if she didn't have it, so just send it back, give it to charity, Alison, and shut this thing down.
So should she get the money then?
Well, to give it to charity, I have no problems with that.
Should she get the money? Yes, she should get the money.
To give it to charity, no problems with that.
But it's my money. I don't want it to go to charity.
I don't want it to go to charity. And finally, Vicky Pryce, should she get the money?
I think if she hasn't actually broken the rules of the bank itself, and they think that her contract is such that she's entitled to it, then yes, she should get it.
Right, well, that's their thoughts. What are yours? Thank you very much to Roger Guilloube. He's a personal finance and credit expert and CEO of Fair Money. Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe. Vicky Pryce, Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre of Economic and Business Research. And Peter Edwards, former editor of the Labour List. So what are your views? GBviews at gbnews.com. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Dame Alison Rose get a big payout after the Farage banking scandal? You will hear the thoughts of my panel, Lizzie Cundy and Matthew Laza. But first, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
It's 5:32. Very good evening to you from the GB Newsroom. Israel has exchanged fire with militants on its northern border with Lebanon. As fears grow, the conflict in the Middle East will escalate. Sirens have been heard in northern Israel. Anti-tank missiles have been fired at Israeli army personnel near that border. Tanks and artillery have responded, striking Hezbollah military infrastructure. Earlier, Israel said its troops are in the field in Gaza, suggesting a ground offensive is in the early stages, and that follows a night of intense bombing and airstrikes in the north of the enclave. And no casualty figures have been released as all communications in Gaza remain down, and the military is advising residents to relocate immediately. Meanwhile, around 100,000 pro-Palestinian protesters have taken to the streets of London to call for an end to Israel's bombardment of Gaza. One arrest was made after a police officer was assaulted. Protesters were heard chanting, "Stop arming Israel, stop bombing Gaza," but also "From the river to the sea," despite controversy around the slogan's meaning. The Met has said it will intervene if protesters are deemed to be supporting terrorism. A proposal to close rail ticket offices has resulted in the biggest ever response to a public consultation. The RMT union says around 750,000 passengers have had their say. The union's head, Mick Lynch, is warning the government against the closure, saying 98% of those who responded are opposed to the controversial plans. And not looking good on the weather front for this Halloween weekend. There are weather warnings in place in all sorts of parts of the country, England, Scotland. These pictures posted to social media show flooding in Hastings, that's on the south coast. The rain warning covers Brighton, Canterbury, London, also in Scotland, with some rail services there suspended following damage caused by Storm Babette. More on all of our stories on our website, gbnews.com, and I'll be back with more around 6 o'clock. Now it's over to Nana.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's time, though, for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Dame Alison Rose get a big payout after the Farage debanking scandal? Now, the former Nat West boss is up for a payout and bonuses of up to 10 million quid after she stepped down following the row over the way the bank closed accounts held by Nigel Farage. But an independent review has revealed that the closure of Farage's account did not follow the bank's policies, but the decision was lawful for predominantly commercial reasons. The GB News presenter has described the report as a whitewash. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Dame Alison Rose get a big payout after the Farage debanking scandal? Well, joining me to discuss, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. Lizzie, what do you think about that?
I don't think she should get a dime. And also the Dame should go as well. This woman has a few glasses of fizz and, you know, her mouth sings like a canary. Honestly, loose lips sink ships. In her case, nearly sank a bank. She broke data protection rules. Totally, I mean, what she did in her role, in her position, was a disgrace. And I'm sorry, she should be shown the door. Anyone else in any job would have been, you know, had the book thrown at them. I think it's disgusting if she gets anything at all.
Well, 10 million's quite a bit, isn't it? I mean, does she deserve 10 million? We own 39%.
We still own, yeah, and
their shares have been tumbling all week on the back of their handling of it. I think it's interesting. So the bank did its results this week, and they didn't confirm that she was getting the money. So I think they're moving towards not giving it to her, which I agree with Lizzie is absolutely the right thing to do. And I think particularly the Information Commissioner, who regulates how all our data is handled, which is a separate to the internal report that you quoted from, they were clear that she broke on two counts, that she broke confidentiality. So I think, you know, if you're the chief executive, the buck stops here.
Yeah.
If you're paid the big bucks, your behaviour's got to be absolutely scrupulous. And as we've seen this week, independent from the Information Commissioner, she shouldn't have been talking about his account after a glass or two of fizz, as Lizzie says.
And if you've breached your contract, you don't get any money. That's the rules. Why should it be different for her? And let's not feel sorry for this lady. She gets 12.4 million she's been paid in the past 4 years.
She's not going to starve.
No. I think it's disgusting.
Well, then she might struggle to get another job, I think, after this.
No, but also what happened to Nigel was absolutely disgusting. He was so brave to come out, and he's helped so many others since. And it's a fundamental right of anyone to have a bank account for survival. But she is a disgrace of a woman. And I say, take away her damehood. I'm going to demand it.
I think you should have it instead.
Thank you.
But can you split it?
Me? Well, I was looking. I realised that you perhaps you should have started with me.
It's mine.
Yeah, it's mine. No, I'll let Nana have it. But I can't see anyone.
That's because I think it should go to the Lords. I think it should be the Baroness. That was a bit late coming back, but it was okay.
But can I just say, it's part owned, Nat West, and by the taxpayer, as you said, 38.6%. Exactly. And I think we should have a say in it. And I am having a say in it.
I think I have to agree with you all. I'm sure that there are those who would argue that because part of it would be a pension, there are things that she's probably put money into, then I don't know about that element of it. Perhaps the pension element of it she should be able to keep.
Yes.
Because she's put.
But this is a bonus, I think, isn't it?
But where it comes to things like bonuses and any extra things that you would get on, the reason why she got all of that was because she resigned. But she had to resign, otherwise she would have been sacked. And I think when that is the case, there is an argument to say that that person should
absolutely get it. And the same rules, Nana, should apply to everybody, no matter where they are. If it was somebody in a branch who'd made a mistake, if they've still got any branches left, the Nat West opposite my house has been closed for a year now, then they would have lost. They would have been treated. They wouldn't have kept their bonus, so they would have kept their pension, of course, but they wouldn't have been. They need to be treated fair, and that's all about fairness in our society because it sends the wrong signals. But there's one rule for those at the top and one rule for the bottom.
I'm sorry, but is this the first time she's done it once? How do we not know she's done it before? She got caught out this time. I'm afraid she's not to be trusted.
Well, I also would like the bank to explain, because the whole sort of WhatsApp messages that were exposed were so defamatory towards Nigel. It was absolutely abhorrent. I mean, they're still calling him grifter, they're calling him racist, even after some of them saying that, they're pleased that they've, hopefully one of them thought that they may have chased him out of the country and they were pleased about
that. Was extraordinary.
And this is after.
Why were they all still talking? Why were they all still talking about it? Haven't they got something better to do? They shouldn't be doing that at all. And, of course, they could just do it in reverse. This could be about anybody from anywhere in politics or public life, or somebody they didn't like because they didn't like them on the telly.
I'd like to have those people exposed as well.
Exactly. I would like them exposed, and I'd also like to expose that this bank, Coots, had an MP from Qatar delivered millions in a holder, and that is fact. This bank, who thinks they're all prim and proper and acting like judge and jury, I'm so sorry, you're a disgrace. And, what did we fight for the Second World War? Freedom of speech. And, how dare they talk about Nigel the way they did?
Well, I just think it's astounding that all they're saying is, we're really sorry, the practices weren't right. Oh, by the way, the legal firm that we've employed, who have already expressed their dislike of Brexit, are now going to check this out. And, they didn't see that there was anything unlawful, but they do accept that we acted wrongly. We're still going to give her the money.
Yeah, well, I think at the moment we're not absolutely sure if they are, and I think they shouldn't. And I think this is a big test because two things. I'm a Nat West customer. Everybody, we all pay bank charges, and look where they're going. I think it sends out totally the wrong signal, and it's a real test of leadership for the bank and for the government to make sure they don't.
I don't know if you know, she has hired the law firm of the late Princess Diana.
Oh, goodness me.
So,
she's not
a battle ahead.
She's got a battle.
Well, I think the taxpayer should actually have a say, seeing as the bank are owned. We are the largest majority shareholder, and if we speak, she's got nothing. She hasn't got the chance to do that, because I think most people would say no.
No.
But this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome some of our great British voices on. It's their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing today. I've only got 3 of you. What happened to number 4? Right, it's a nicer box, you see, when there's 3 of you. It doesn't look so good. I'm going to start with you, Brian Dugan. You're there in Solihull. Yes, am I right? Dame Alison Rose, should she get her some 10 million quid?
No, she should not. And in fact, I believe the board initially said that she should continue in place, which actually brings their suitability into question as well. I think the truth had to be extracted in this affair, Nana, if truth be told, almost like a stubborn molar. This is a person who revealed a named client to a journalist and went into the specifics of that client's holdings in the bank. And that's a clear breach and violation of client confidentiality, clear unsuitability. It's totally wrong, and she shouldn't get another penny.
Right, well, let's bring on Alan Cook. He's a new great British voice. Al, welcome. You're there in London. Alan, what's your thoughts?
Well, the answer should be no, yes, and it's the wrong question.
Oh, is it?
So
this will be the last time you're on as a great British voice, actually, Alan.
Why is she still not been sacked? She was allowed to resign, and that is the problem. She's now on gardening leave, so she's going to work out the rest of her notice period, which is where that 2.4 million comes from. She potentially will have bonuses of 2.9 million, but the biggest chunk is the unvested shares, which is 5.2 million. And now the unvested shares are shares which are put aside for an employee, but not given them to them until certain criteria are met or conditions. And so conditions may be, you have to debank 25 centre-right politicians to get your unvested shares, or it may be just the fact that you've worked for the company for another year, so you get your share options. So that is the biggest lump. But why was she not sacked? Everyone thinks she's committed gross misconduct. So I think the actual question should be, 1, why wasn't she sacked? 2, why did Howard Davies not go as well, who is the chair of the whole group?
I think he's going next year.
He's working here, isn't he? So he's been allowed to work that out, and then he's going.
Yeah.
But to be honest, the majority of the board should have gone. And I think it's like an inward-leaning building. They're all leaning on each other. If they get rid of her,
we've got to
the whole thing crashes. But we won't get rid of her.
I love your thinking, though, and I agree with you. She should have been sacked, but I don't know why they didn't do that. But that's so she could collect all this. That was the whole thing. Jonathan Jones.
They will follow her. They would be also on the way out.
Jonathan Jones.
Yeah, very quickly now. I think definitely should have been sacked. But worse than that, I think there's something very strange going on when all these big corporations don't really understand what free speech is. They're all talking about, well, in fact, they're very liberal with leaking secrets about their customers. But what about just good old-fashioned free speech? People talk about it, but what you're doing right now is proper free speech, and these big corporates should get behind it and support it and stop giving people like Nigel such a hard time. Get a cup of tea and settle down and talk to each other.
Yeah, get a cup of tea. We're waiting for that. I left my cup back. I've only got a glass. I'd forgot my cup. Sorry, Jonathan, but yeah, great. Love it. Thank you very much. That's Jonathan Jones. He's there in Cornwall. Brian Dugan and Alan Cook. Good to talk to you. Those are my great British voices. Now, we'll do the quick one. This is a story that caught my eye today. ITV reportedly updated their HR policy to question staff over personal relationships in the workplace in the wake of the Philip Schofield affair. So what do you think then? Because he was with a colleague. The broadcaster is reportedly asking its staff to declare any office associations, whether romantic or completely platonic. So should office romances be declared? Lizzie Cundy?
No, not at all. That's my business. Why would I? No, not at all. And they're not going to tell the truth.
No.
Anyway, if you're asked and you're seeing, someone else in the office, I certainly wouldn't tell anyone. I'd keep it secret squirrel.
Do you mean our romance is going to have to stay secret, Lizzie?
I think so, darling. It's out.
I wouldn't admit it with him.
Not in my suit. Lizzie's mum has told her off as abusing my jacket earlier. Quite right. Lizzie's mum is always spot on.
When I finish the show, my mum, I call her and if she doesn't answer it, I know there's something that I've done wrong. It'll be something like, well, your makeup or your wig's wonky.
Excellent.
Right, now it's time for the quick-fire quiz. It's the part of the show where I test the panel on some of the other stories hitting the headlines right now. Joining me to do that, Lizzie Cundy, your buzzer, please, and Matthew Lauser. Right, and please play along at home. Right, so this is question 1. What's the name of the prominent border crossing between Gaza and Egypt? Is it A, Taba, B, Rafah, or C, Sinai? Matthew Lauser.
B, Rafah.
B, Rafah. Lizzie Cundy?
It's B, Rafah.
Is it B, Rafah? It is, in fact, B, Rafah. Well done, you're absolutely correct. Question 2. Which losing candidate left the results ceremony at a by-election whilst the winner was giving their speech? Was it A, Andrew Cooper, B, Festus Sakabuse, or C, Lucy Cartwright?
You
pressed it beforehand, so I'm going to have to go to Lizzie.
It's A.
A. Is it A?
It is.
The answer is A, which would have been...
We're both so good.
He needs to learn some manners.
He learned the manners, though, and...
Your mum won't be happy.
I've got an ejector button under this seat. Yes, so Andrew Cooper, he was the Tory candidate in Tamworth. Andrew bolted out of the door immediately after it was announced that
that
won
was
his seat.
disgraceful.
Yeah. I would do exactly the same thing.
Would you? Oh, no, that's not sporty.
I don't care. I didn't win.
You know, whenever you're partying, you're meant to stand there and say...
Manners. Maketh the man.
If somebody wins, I'll be like... Like in the award ceremony, I won't be the one that goes... I'll be like, it should have been me! Question 3. True or false? Donald Trump was fined $20,000 in his second gag order violation. Ooh, I don't...
Lizzie was premature there, so yes.
Tell tit.
You're right, he's
go on, no, you go on.
Matthew, true or false?
Yes, true.
It's true.
True.
I was going to take your first answer, which was yes, which wasn't what the question was, but if we're going to be indicative, it's 2-1. Yes, it's right. It is true. It is true indeed. Actually, no, it's false.
It was 10,000.
I'm just making you feel good. It was 10 grand.
That serves me right.
There you go.
I'm hanging my head in shame.
So you're totally wrong. So it's not 2, and it's 1-1.
It's 1-1.
Yeah. OK, so question 4. The Supreme Court in which country just refused to legalise same-sex marriage? Was it A, India, B, Germany, or C, Ghana? Lizzie Cundy.
C.
Ghana?
Ghana.
What do you think?
It's A, India.
Is it?
It's A, India. It is, in fact, not. I'm from Ghana. It's India. Well, I'm not from Ghana. I'm from Newcastle, but my parents are. So
Newcastle?
Newcastle. I'm a
Away man.
What, a ruler? Yeah, that's what I can say. Right. The court has declined to legitimise same-sex marriage, but has accepted the government's offer to set up a panel to consider granting more legal rights to same-sex couples. OK, so question 5. Which animal has been dubbed Britain's loneliest? Is it A, is it A, a Highland cow, B, a goat, or C, a sheep? Matthew Lauser.
C, a sheep.
A sheep.
I'm going to...
It's a sheep.
It's a sheep.
It's a sheep.
I was at Highland cow. I thought you were talking about Nicola Sturgeon. Sorry.
Oh, no!
Lizzie!
Don't say that. Apologies to Nicola.
Sorry.
She's not. She's one of the crankies.
Apologies to Nicola. She's passed her driving test for the first time this week.
To the crankies.
I'm very sorry. No, she has just passed her driving test at the age of 53.
Let's hope for me, yes.
Because she wanted independence.
She wanted... On today's... Oh, very good. I missed it.
Thank you.
On today's show, I've been asking, will issues surrounding Israel be Labour's undoing? And according to our Twitter poll, 70% of you say yes, it will. I agree with you. 30% of you say no. Say a huge thank you to my panel, Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to Matthew Lauser. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you very much.
And
it was as fun as always.
And as ever, a huge thank you to you at home for your company. It's so wonderful to have you here. Listen, please join me tomorrow at the same time, same place. I'll be joined by Danny Kelly and Christine Hamilton. If you missed the show, don't forget you can catch up on YouTube or via the GBNews app. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow. Actually, don't forget your clocks go. Is it forward or back?
Forward.
Yes, forward. Extra hour.
I'll see you tomorrow at 3. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So for many, there's been plenty of rain and showers around to start the weekend, and this is all due to this large area of low pressure that's going to bring weather fronts up from the southwest across the UK as we go through this weekend. So already into this afternoon, we've seen further heavy rain and maybe the odd thunderstorm too, making its way northwards. And that's going to continue as we go through tonight, to be followed by further heavy showers, especially for southern and western coasts. Particularly blustery as well around both southern and northern coasts, with the potential for coastal gales. So as we start Sunday, a pretty gloomy and wet start for northern England and most of Scotland, with outbreaks of rain that have made their way northwards overnight. Elsewhere, a continuation of those heavy showers, though fewer are making their way inland and staying more confined to southern and western coasts for the second half of the weekend. So a bit more in the way of sunshine and feeling pleasant in that sunshine, with highs of 14 to 15 in the south. Now, as we move on to the new week, it's a bit of a cloudy start again, with further showers around, but mostly going to be around the coasts. So the further inland you are, the better chance you have of seeing some sunny spells into the new week. Remaining fairly unsettled, though, throughout next week, maybe a bit of respite from the showers on Tuesday, and becoming colder in the north.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News. Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best.